clicking start. So 3, 2, 1, and we're on.
Great, I think we are live. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cllr Mohammed Umair, and I'm the chair of the Bedfont Feltham and Hanworth Area Forum. The time is now 5:33 p.m. So I would like to welcome you all to this virtual meeting, and I would like to welcome the members of the Area Forum who are sitting with us this evening, as well as the council officers who will be assisting members throughout the meeting, as well as members of the public. In addition, I would like to welcome members of the public who are watching this meeting at home. As you all may know, until recently, virtual meetings for council business were not legal, but as a result of coronavirus and pandemic and quarantine arrangements required by the government, the law has recently been changed to let local authorities meet in virtual ways to make decisions. So therefore, this meeting is taking place using the recently introduced government regulations. And the way this meeting will work is I, as the chair, will be running the meeting and inviting people to speak. Please raise your hand when you wish to speak or when you are asked to speak. Ideally, from in the past, if the members of the forum remember, can recall, if you need to speak, I may not be able to see your hands raised because I'll be trying to do multiple things. So if you just drop a D in the box and I'll run through questions in order of precedence. Yeah, example, Joe's just posted an example right there. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this concept. The etiquette for the matters of the area forum and for the officers who are expecting to speak will be to mute your microphones until you're asked to speak. This means that only one person will be speaking at any one time, and there will be no background noise, making it easier for us all to follow the meeting, and also for those watching at home. I will also ask members to say who they are and when they make a contribution, and to speak slowly and clearly for the same reason. I would now like to invite, or I would now like to introduce each of the members here tonight, one by one, and I will start myself. My name is Cllr Mohammed Umair, and I'm the chair of this area forum, and I am one of the ward councillors for the Felton West ward. May I now invite the remaining councillors to speak, starting with the vice chair of the forum, Dr. Ahmed. Is Councillor Ahmed here with us?
I don't think she's on the call, Chair.
Okay. Could we get Councillor Javed Akhundzada to introduce herself?
Hello, thank you, Chair. My name is Javed Akhundzada, and I'm a local councillor for Bedfont.
Great, thank you. So we've got Candice Atherton.
I don't think she's on the call either, Chair.
I believe she is. She's just sent a message to say she's on the phone, but not physically present in the Teams meeting. So she's there via call. Can you hear us, Candice? Oh, sorry. Can you hear us? Oh, sorry, that was Councillor Panita, I believe. Okay. So she's not with us, I believe. So Councillor Samia Chowdhury.
Samia's mother is seriously ill in hospital, Mohammed. So she's in hospital in a very serious state. She has been sending apologies for meetings for the last couple of weeks. So I spoke to her 2 days ago, and the situation was still serious.
Okay. Okay. Right. Great. Thank you. Could that be noted? So Councillor Komal Chowdhury.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Komal Chowdhury, and I am one of the councillors for Felton North.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Foote.
Hi, I'm Councillor Richard Foote, and I'm a councillor for Hamworth ward.
Great. Councillor Adriana George.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Nice to see you here today. It's a pleasure after such a long time. I'm Adriana George. I'm a councillor, a Labour councillor for London Borough of Hounslow, Bedfont ward. Thank you.
Great. So Councillor Puneet Girawal.
Good evening, Chair.
We can just about hear you, Councillor Paneet.
Good evening, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Hi, I'm Councillor Paneet Garawal and I represent Hamworth Park Ward.
Great. Councillor Bishnu Gurun. Sorry, Vishnu, could you stop, because we can't hear you at all. We can hear squeaks. You may have to sign out. Sorry, Councillor Vishnu, just hold on. We can. Could someone try get in contact with Councillor Vishnu on his mobile and try explain the situation? If someone from the IT team, Joe, or someone could get in contact with him.
I'll do that, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. That'll be appreciated. Thank you. Councillor Hanif Khan. Councillor Hanif. I believe Councillor Hanif was with us.
Yeah, he was with us. He is with us. Probably he's waiting.
Unless he's on mute.
So sorry about that. So my name is Councillor Hanif Khan and I'm the ward member for Hanworth Park, and I'm also the lead member for Transport and the One Hounslow. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Councillor Hinamir.
Chair, Hina will be joining us soon. Apology for lateness.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Alan Mitchell.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Alan Mitchell, Felton West Ward.
Great. Councillor Ragwinder Sidhu.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Ragwinder Singh Sidhu from Bedford Ward, and I'm also a Deputy Mayor of London Borough of Hounslow. Thank you.
Great. Councillor Kuldeep Tak.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Kuldeep Tak, Ward Councillor for Feltham North Ward.
Great. I believe we've got Councillor Atherton. Please, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, apologies for slight lateness. I'm Candice Atherton. I am councillor in Hanworth Ward and I am also lead member for Adult Social Care, Health and Public Health. It's great to be here tonight.
Great, thank you. So we've got a couple of apologies. I mean, I've got there's an apology for lateness from Aqsa Ahmed and Councillor was it Samir Chowdhury, Richard?
Sorry, yes, Samir, her mother is seriously ill in hospital.
Okay, great. Okay, Councillor Aqsa Ahmed's on the line. Councillor Aqsa Ahmed, finally. Aqsa Ahmed, would you want to introduce yourself, please? Okay, so let's move on. So we, could I remind all the members to mute the microphones and of course turn off their cameras, just for the sake of course, so to avoid any technical issues or any delays on. Okay, so could I ask so of course we've got the APO and the clerk with us tonight to assist throughout in order for us to have a smooth rollout of the meeting. Could I ask them to introduce themselves? I'll go in the order of Joanne, then Wendy, and then Kay.
Hi, Chair. Thank you. I'm Joan Conlon. I'm the APO temporary for this area forum, here to assist in whatever way you need. Thank you.
Great. Wendy.
Oh, good evening. I'm Wendy Mary. I'm from Democratic Services.
Great. And finally, Kay.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm here to assist Wendy. I'm also from Committee Services.
Great. Thank you. So of course we also have officers acting in a producing role for the technical side of the meeting, and they are not expected to be involved in the discussion of the meeting this evening. So I will thank them for their help, and ask them not to introduce themselves. So could I just remind everyone to have their microphones muted? Okay, so some members of the public are reminded that the agenda and all the items being discussed by the area forum tonight can be found on the council website under the Bedfont, Feltham and Hanworth area forum meetings page. So if you want to see them, that's where to look. I also want to make sure that all the members have seen the agenda papers, and please speak now if you've not had them or if you haven't received a copy. Okay, so I believe everyone's received one. So and of course, if you should find that you're having technical problems and need to log out of the meeting and come back in again, please let me know immediately, and ideally beforehand, before you leave, but if not afterwards, by turning on your microphone. And finally, I would like to say to any member of the public listening or watching, thank you for joining us this evening and for your time. We have this meeting. We hope this meeting will go well, but I mean, any virtual meetings may suffer from an unexpected technical hitch, so please bear with us. And I should also clarify that this meeting is being recorded and it will be made available on the council's YouTube channel in the next few days. So contributors to the meeting are asked to remember that they will therefore be included in the recording of this public meeting. And thank you. So we'll now move to the first item of the agenda. Of course, I could take apologies. So we've had apologies from Councillor Samia Chowdhury, and I believe Councillor Akhtar Ahmed is with us. We've got questions, so I'll take Councillor Alan Mitchell. Is that apologies for someone?
It's not apologies, Chair. It's just an announcement or communication.
Okay, yeah, I think we've got apologies already. So if there are no other apologies, we'll have the announcement, Councillor Mitchell.
Okay, yeah, very briefly, just after Christmas, many of you will be aware, it was an 18-month campaign, but we managed to get a sub-post office facility back in central Felton so that folk didn't have to go all the way down to Parkfield Crescent. We worked on this as ward councillors, as Umair will know, and Hina, and with the local MP. But I really want to thank all of the people who got involved, all of the residents, so that we can make a very clear case why we need a post office facility in the centre of Felton, in the town centre, and hopefully now we've got one, we'll keep one. So thank you very much, Chair, and thank you everyone that contributed to the campaign.
Great, thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Great. Of course, we can confirm that we have a quorum, and there are no matters on the agenda. So okay. So we now come to the minutes of the last meeting of the committee held on 19th November 2020. I intend to take both corrections for accuracy and any matter arising together. Therefore, may I ask members if they have any corrections that they may wish to propose. Please speak now if you do so. And if there's more than one person, just drop a D in the chat. Councillor Hanif.
Thank you, Chair. It was just in the open forum on item number 14. I did raise it earlier, just checking that was corrected. That's all. I believe it may have been, but I've only got the hard copy that was sent. I don't know if it's been corrected online or not. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Joe, Wendy, could you confirm that, please?
No, we'll take it as an amendment, though, Chair.
Okay, great, thank you. Could we agree the minutes?
Agreed.
Great.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Great, thanks. Okay, thank you. So I would, I would usually now sign a physical copy of the minutes, but as this is currently impractical, I shall ask the committee officers to ensure that I am provided with a physical copy to sign either by post or when it is possible to attend Hanslow House. And in the meantime, the minutes will be formally recorded that we have agreed the minutes as a correct record of the last meeting. Okay, so so of course, members of the public were asked to submit questions for the area forum ahead of the meeting, as they were not able to speak to members directly, as they would be, of course, in conventional, as you would in a conventional meeting. However, for residents watching this meeting, it is possible to submit questions via the Q&A function on MS Team, as you may have used in the previous area forum. And if you're new, I mean, you would be able to see that for those watching from home, I mean, there's a Q&A button. So if you select on the right side of the screen and type your question in the compose box and then select send, yeah, we should be able to see it. And if you would prefer to ask your question anonymously, then of course select anonymous, and members will try to answer as many questions as they can tonight. So we now move on to the first item for discussion, and that's one of key interest, I'm sure, to everyone. Of course, so we've got the COVID-19 update. So I mean, we've got presenters, we've got officers here with us, so with the full detail and on the vaccination centres, on a few key numbers and stats within Feltham, Hanworth, and the Bedfont area primarily, and how we compare, and some of the numbers I'm sure we would all be aware of, or it'd be good to know, and some of the priorities on the vaccination. And could I have the officers come and introduce themselves and run us through the presentation?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for inviting me. My name's Kelly O'Neill. I'm Director of Public Health for the London Borough of Hounslow, and tonight I'm working with Sam Greehey. Sam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Kelly. Good evening, all. I'm Sam Greehey. I'm a public health officer as part of the public health team at the London Borough of Hounslow.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Sam and Neil. Kelly. Sorry. Yeah. Once you're ready, just start the presentation and proceed.
Okay. We'll wait for the slides just to come up.
Slide. Sorry for the hold up.
No worries. So what we are going to do is go just through a series of slides. Now, there's a lot of information on these slides, but we will just pick out the key points. And what the aim is that we will take you through the story of the pandemic in Hounslow, and then we will also look at your particular area and how that has been impacted using the information. And as you said, we will also just give a highlight of what our current priorities are, and particularly in relation to the vaccination programme, which is at the moment the really key priority that we're working on. If you can go to the next slide, please. So this is a pandemic curve, and what this graph shows you is a curve of the number of cases. So each of those bars on this grid is a day, and that is the number of cases, positive cases of COVID, that are reported on that particular day. The dark blue line is a rolling 7-day rate. So it's an aggregated number that evens out. So it allows us to smooth over peaks and troughs of activity. So what this graph is actually showing you is a number of things that you won't be able to know from just looking at it. Is that the first wave round between March and May, that is a really that's a really small peak, and the reason why is that because it is the number of cases, the positive cases were only being identified for people being admitted to hospital, so community testing hadn't started. So the sole information that we had at that point in time was just based on people who were tested positive as they were admitted to hospital. What we also know during that period of time is that quite a significant number of people were experiencing the symptoms that we're now very familiar with, and actually it is difficult to actually understand what a true estimate of people who were truly positive at that period of time, and that can only be done through serial antibody testing, and that's not been rolled out in any way that could give us an overall picture of what was going on. So obviously during the summer months, very, very low rates of infection that were detected, and then suddenly, coinciding with the sort of the return of schools, we start to see this increase in activity up until sort of November time, when we went into lockdown 2. Now, as you can see, we went into lockdown 2, and our rates were creeping up, but they weren't particularly high. Now, notable feature for Hounslow, and it's a similar feature in Ealing and Brent, is that we've noticed that the impact of lockdown, or both lockdowns that we've come out to, was very little. So we ended up sort of not having this significant decrease that we have seen in other parts of London, probably as a result of many of our residents being key workers, and therefore sort of the amount of activity and people moving around the borough has not been as great in terms of a decline as we've seen elsewhere. So I have put some figures in that just to show you how quickly this exponential growth in activity was. So if you look back on the 12th of December, our rate of infection was 171 per 100,000. So that was when we sort of probably started to see a little bit of a rise from the impact of lockdown having been completed. And between the 21st and the 28th, quite a rapid increase. But the 12th of January until the 14th of January, we did see that the most significant, the highest rate of infection at 1,141 per 100,000, and that was probably an accumulation of whatever happened over Christmas and New Year. So we have started to see the impact of lockdown 3. So on the right hand side of the graph, you'll see the 26th and the 27th, and you can note between it's 645 per 100,000, reducing to 596, and today the rate will have gone down even further. But actually what we are seeing is, again, this strange pattern that we have for the borough, where the impact is really slow. So whereas some boroughs in London will have dramatically dropped their rates, it's a very, very slow tail off. Now this is really important, and I'll just be absolutely clear about this, is that rates of infection are important because they impact on hospital admissions. You have high rates of infection, you will inevitably have high rates of, or high numbers of people who need hospital care, and as a result of that you get a massive increase in the number of people who do die. Next slide please. So this is the current infection rate as of the 27th of January. So just looks at sort of all of the London boroughs and compares rates of infection generally across London. Now, obviously, just after the new year, what we saw is East London having significant numbers. Now, what you've seen is a kind of a movement of the virus as it has worked its way across London. And this is common. We saw this right from the outset, with particularly Brent, Ealing and Hounslow having the highest rates at this moment in time. That will change once we start seeing the real impact of lockdown, but it will be a slow process. So Sam, next slide please. Sam, you can take us through the next few slides please.
Thank you, Kelly. So this map here is dividing Hounslow up into wards, as you will be familiar with, and this is just covering the entirety of the pandemic and the number of cases per each ward up until the 23rd of January, but that's information that we would have received on the 26th of January, so on Tuesday. And generally, just what I want to document across this presentation is, again, the recent increase in cases, so from this middle of December period up until now, and where those increases have been across the entirety of the borough. So just in terms of some normal general statistics, so as of the 20th of December, Hounslow had seen 8,372 cases. You fast forward just a month and the total number of cases is now surpassed 20,000. So that real short period of time, we've seen a real drastic increase, as Kelly mentioned with the graph beforehand. And that equates to about 146% increase as well. terms of the age profile and the demographics of the cases we've seen, the bulk majority of cases we have seen have been within the working age population. It comes to around 70%. From a public health perspective, we do keep a close eye on the cohort over the age of 60, which across the entirety of the pandemic has been around that 15% mark. We do also keep tabs on the ethnicity data of those who do test positive, but just as a sort of a clear sort of outlier is that the ethnicity information provided by those that have tested positive is very hit and miss. Not everyone records it, so often you're using quite an incomplete data set. However, from what we have seen, it's generally representative of the population dynamics that we know within the borough, that being predominantly British and predominantly Indian. So nothing jumps out as an anomaly in that perspective. In terms of the geography of the cases, where we've seen the bulk majority of them throughout the entirety of the pandemic, Hounslow Central, Hounslow West and Heston West have seen the highest number of cases. But as you can see from the darker sort of purple areas, that's where the number of cases has been higher. And we can see that different areas have been affected at different levels. But there is a clear sort of divide between Chiswick and the rest of the borough, and the main focus of the area of the cases has been within this sort of central and western area. Can I have the next slide, please, Robert? Thank you. So this is just some of the parameters that we consider on a daily basis to report Hounslow's performance. So the graph on the left is purely just seconding the graph that Kelly spoke about at the beginning. This is purely showing our infection rate and that drastic increase and sort of slow gradual decrease since we hit our peak. So the key parameters that we do consider over on the right, so from the 17th of January to the 23rd of January, which we were reported on Tuesday from the 26th, our 7-day infection rate was at 645 cases per 100,000, which equates to about 1,752 cases in itself. Again, the proportion of cases in that working age population has matched sort of the general theme, so it was around the 72% range. 272 of those cases had been over the age of 60, so that's about 16% of the entirety of that 7-day period. Our case positivity, which is the proportion of tests completed which come back positive, that was around 13.3%. Sort of an ultimate an ultimate way for public health to work is to try and get that number as low as possible, because otherwise that's indicative of the community spread. In terms of the 7-day tests being completed, we want to get as many tests conducted, and we're sort of around this 13,000 mark, which is a lot more sort of considered in comparison to earlier in the pandemic and when wider testing was available. But the key sort of indicators that we do look at is our position within London and position within England. And so on Tuesday, we were second in London in terms of the highest infection rate, and in England we were 5th. But as Kelly mentioned, the situation is always dynamic and it changes quite frequently. And then finally, we do consider the number of deaths that we have seen, and we report this sort of on a daily basis. And we at the moment have been focusing sort of the number of deaths that we've seen due to COVID-19 in January. And as of Tuesday, there had been 142 deaths. And if you compare that to back in December, which we'd only reported 53, again, there's this drastic increase, which is again representative of the infection rates that we've seen sort of 11 to 18 days previously, which Kelly will speak about more later. Robert, can I have the next slide, please? So this is just displaying where we've seen the cases from that 7-day period across the borough. And again, Hounslow Central and Hounslow Heath and Hounslow West, sort of the main areas as well. But then more recently, we've seen Bedfont has increased and seen a number of cases there as well. It must be noted as well that with this reduction in cases, we tend to, with the way that we report it, we do see the transition of areas where cases are highest, it fluctuates a lot. And due to the 7-day rolling, this can change as well. But again, predominantly the darker areas is within this central and western area of the borough. Next slide, please, Robert. So when we consider the infection rate of Hounslow, we consider the borough as a whole, but obviously the population sizes differs across the borough, and the impact of COVID has been felt differently across different areas. So when you consider the infection rate being in Hounslow at this time was 645, if you then consider the infection rate considering looking at the wards, you can see the impact is felt greatest. So particularly Bedfont, Feltham North, Hounslow Heath and Heston East, they've all seen the impact being greatest there. Interestingly, the Hounslow Central, whilst it's seen the highest number of cases, again, this is where considering the population size is key, because Hounslow Central does have the highest and largest number of population residing in that ward. But it's key just to consider that in terms of the last 7 days, Bedfont had a similar sort of picture in terms of number of cases, but due to the population size, the impact is notably greater. Next slide, please, Robert. Thank you. This is a hotspot map, which is essentially using the information that we receive on a postcode level and enables us to pinpoint where we're seeing particularly the highest number of cases within each ward. And so what this enables us to do is target resources in these particular areas where we're seeing the greatest impact. So when I mean resources, I mean we are able to then tailor communication specifically, but then also what we've recently been doing is using this information to help inform our enforcement team to conduct patrols and site visits in areas where infection rates are highest. And again, as you can see, the clusters that can be seen again within Hounslow Central, Hounslow Heath, Bedfont, and also Felton West as well. So we use this to sort of inform our decision making and doing site visits, etc. Next slide, please, Robert. Thank you. So focusing now just more on the Bedfont, Feltham and Hanworth area, in terms of the number of cases in total up to the 23rd of January, we can see that there's been 5,002 cases, which is representative of about 24% of all the cases in Hounslow. If we break it down for the more specific wards, Bedfont has seen the highest out of this area, but in terms of the rest of the borough, it's 9th highest with 1,084 cases, which comes to about 5.3% of total cases. But again, what I want to document here is just this really recent increase since the 20th of December. So as of the 20th of December, Bedfont had only seen 397 cases, but now within just over a month, it's now seeing 1,084. Picture is the same again with Felton West and Felton North, both sort of within this 9th, 10th, 11th position in terms of highest number of cases within the borough. But again, have all documented over 150% increases in terms of the numbers. Hamworth and Hamworth Park are sort of slightly further behind in terms of the number of cases. You can see they're 14th and 16th highest within the borough. But again, what's clear is that recent increase has clearly been felt across the entirety of the borough as opposed to just isolated wards. Next slide, please, Robert. So this is just documenting the total number of cases over time within the borough. And so what I've done is looked at the highest performing wards, the lowest performing wards, and then how Bedfont, Hamworth and Felton sits within that area. And as you can see Hounslow Central, Heston West and Hounslow West up top. And then you can see sort of clearly within the middle table, middle ground is Bedfont, Felton and Hamworth. But again, what's clear, and as I've been mentioning before, this clear increase has been felt across all of these boroughs, wards, even within Chiswick. But it's clear there is a big difference between the leading and the lowest with Chiswick and then Hounslow as well. Next slide, please, Robert. So in terms of the test profile of the cases within Bedfont, Feltham and Hamworth, the picture is very much similar to what we've seen across the rest of the borough. The gender breakdown, slightly more women have tested positive over the course of the pandemic. In terms of the age profile, again, we're seeing the bulk majority of cases within this 20 to 59 age range, and 14% have been over the age of 60. Again, the ethnicity, we do keep tabs on and monitor quite frequently. And as I mentioned before, because it's being an incomplete data set and we're purely at the mercy of those that do provide it, it's sort of expected to see that the proportion of cases represents again what we've seen in the rest of the borough. Next slide, please, Robert. So this map is essentially a proportional simple map of COVID-19 cases at postcode level. So each blue circle you can see here is a COVID-19 case at within a postcode. The bigger the circle, the more cases have been recorded in that postcode. And the reason why I'm showing you this map here is purely just to identify that we've seen multiple postcodes that have seen numerous numbers of cases within that postcode. So there are a greater number of cases that postcodes that have seen more than one case. Additionally, this also helps us identify and see that cases have been seen across all the wards. There is no specific area where we've seen the majority of these cases. It's clearly been documented across, which again can be indicative of this highly transmissible strain, but also there is the element of household spread and which could be contributing through intergenerational households. Next slide, please, Robert. Thank you. So every day we use on our sit reps that we do our situation reports, we can consider the number of COVID-19 deaths that are reported from Public Health England. So every day on the publicly available data, we keep tabs on the total number. but which today stands at 432 deaths, unfortunately. But in terms of more granular reports that are provided by the Office of National Statistics, which is what this slide here is showing, these reports provide more granular level information. However, they operate on a 2 to 3 month time lag. So whilst we're obviously towards the end of January, the most recent report we've had and been able to look at has been up to the end of November. But what you can see up to the end of November is that Hounslow had recorded 245 deaths due to COVID-19. This has been, the numbers of these have been spread across the entirety of the borough. It hasn't been in just one particular area. In terms of the age profile, 87% of cases that have unfortunately passed away have been over the age of 60. And more notably, 42% of deaths have been over the age of 80 as well. In terms of the gender of those that have died, we've seen plenty more men that have died due to COVID in comparison to women. Next slide, please, Robert. And then if we focus more specifically on the Bedfont, Feltham and Hanworth wards, 24% of total deaths up until the 30th of November had been recorded within these wards, with Felton North being the joint second highest in the borough with Heston West. The age profile, again, sort of very similar to what we've seen with the rest of the borough, predominantly over the age of 60 and over the age of 80 as well. And the gender profile, again, matches what we've seen across the rest of the borough. And I'm going to hand back to Kelly. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we're dealing with this from a council and a system perspective, because it's just not the council working by itself, is that as the pandemic has developed, we've actually had lots of significant improvements in data. Prior to it's probably about May time, the data that we were working with was just so out of date and so incomplete. But now the data is much more robust, with the exceptions of some time lags for example, as Sam pointed out, for deaths. So actually having a really good data set and an understanding of where cases are, we've been able to modify the way the way that we've responded and really target certain communities. So it allows us to identify where cases are, and by using where these cases are to identify clusters and small outbreaks, and start to do this kind of enhanced contact tracing. So looking at these individual cases and how they link to other cases, whether that's as part of a care home setting or people who are employed in the same location or within schools, and that allows us to develop sort of a local epidemiology of the disease, to sort of understand how the disease is moving around, and also to, as I said, to be able to target certain interventions. So it allows us to really monitor, identify and respond. And actually we do this in order to protect the population. We have finite resources, and we really do have to target where the problems emerge and where incidents emerge. So in terms of outbreaks, we have lots. Certainly this new variant of COVID that they identified first in Essex, which is much more transmissible, it accounts for something about well, it's definitely 76.9% of all of our cases. So you see this kind of massive transmissible virus that is moving around quite quickly. So whereas in the first wave, care homes were affected, but we managed to protect them quite significantly. What we see now is sort of case after case, and we've had quite some very large outbreaks in some of our care communities, which we've had to respond to. But we kind of recognise that these were areas of vulnerability. So obviously, as we've hit the second wave of infection, we've got a lot of services who are working together in order to protect these particular environments. Similar for schools, but obviously the vulnerability is a little bit different, because children aren't as affected as older people are. But what we have seen is where individual cases are identified in schools, that can impact a large number of children having to go home. Obviously schools are shut at this moment in time, and I think some of that transmission that was going on in schools, many of which was asymptomatic, is demonstrated in some of our case figures. So lockdown is effective based on the number of young people who are identifying as positive or being tested as positive at the moment. So we have outbreaks in all closed communities. So hospitals are closed community, prisons and the youth offending. In Feltham, anywhere that people congregate, you will get outbreaks of infection. So in businesses and workplaces, and a lot of work is being done by environmental health and regulation services, because as a council, we're responsible for businesses. So just following up cases, making sure that they are COVID secure environments, and really stipulating these are the rules, and where working from home can apply, they should apply. We also get outbreaks in houses of multiple occupancy, and much of this work is about looking for the information and piecing it together. So it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, but I have to say that some of the pieces are often missing. So we have to actually go out and knock on doors to actually find out what the where the gaps are, and obviously sports clubs. What we have got is a pretty robust test, track and trace service, which is a national program linked to a local response. So testing for asymptomatic cases is done at Twickenham and Heathrow. We've also got Bell Road in Hounslow. We've got a site at Heston. We've also got a site at Chiswick, a new site that went live at Chiswick. And gradually we're sort of the cases that we've got and the number of tests that we do is actually significantly higher than that, as Sam said, than we had a month ago. We've also set up PCR asymptomatic testing through lateral flow, this kind of rapid testing, and we originally set one up at Hounslow House and at Heston Library, and we put a site over at Isleworth because that was the kind of the central place in the borough where the number of cases were highest. Obviously, we've now identified that Bedfont has an increase in the number of cases, so we've moved some lateral flow testing over to that side of the borough. So at the rugby club there is a new testing site, and we're also targeting the businesses that are particularly in this particular area, especially as businesses that are part of the supply chain to Heathrow Airport. So there are mobile units going to those sites. We do have a lot of capacity, but I have to say that we started to see a little bit of a tail off in the number of people attending, but I think that kind of reflects some additional testing that is going on at Heathrow. So there's two new pilots going on for staff who are working at Heathrow, and that may be causing a little bit of reduction in attendance for those particular sites. Lots of communication and engagement has gone on, and that's we've had to sort of amend that as a kind of universal communications and then targeted communications as and when required. What we have seen is that if we had maintained our initial flow of communications, people would be more fatigued out with communication and messaging than they are already. So lots of partnerships with various groups have taken place because actually this is a public health response that is much bigger than the council. It requires everybody to work together to respond to this in various ways, and we've had to flex significantly to these emerging situations and this new technology and new developments as we've progressed and as they've emerged in order to start thinking about protecting the population. Next slide, please. Now, the absolute priority and the whole priority is to protect the population at this moment in time as we roll out the vaccination program. And it is really important to understand that when we look, as I said, when we look at rates of infection, the rates will only tell us when people have tested positive, okay, and that is the start of someone's journey. And their journey can be incredibly minor, and actually at the end of 10 days they will be non-infectious, and they'll go back to what they were doing in terms of work and school or various routines after that period of isolation. The difficulty is that some people don't progress like that. Some disease progresses into some very, very severe symptoms, and age is the single biggest risk factor for this. So between 11 and 18 days, if your disease pathway is going to get worse, you suddenly find that people, after they've been diagnosed, they will start becoming very unwell. And that's when hospitalisation is required. And actually the amount of activity while rates are high are hitting the hospital on a daily basis. Now, people don't stay in hospital for one day, they stay in hospital for a significant period of time, especially if they become critical. So the impact on the hospital at the moment is incredible. And actually what the hospital are dealing with now is probably our biggest rates of infection. So if you look at 18 to 11 days ago, the rates of infection were between 1,141 and 890. 199. So at the moment in the hospital, there is just shy of 200 COVID positive inpatients. That is a reduction on what we saw last week, so that's positive. But the amount of people who are very acute and requiring critical care and intensive care remains very, very high, because these people will stay in hospital a lot longer. As I said, main things there, as I said, sort of hospital care is actually quite significant, and outbreaks in the community. Next slide, please. So as I've said, I probably don't need to go too much into this. You know, the idea of lockdown is to break the chain of infection. We really are pushing the hand, face and space rules. Enforcement is key. The police are responsible for enforcement of individuals and penalising individuals. We as a council are responsible for businesses, and I've mentioned about the 2 modes of testing. Next slide, please. Now, this is the big ticket one. This is the absolute focus. This is our way out of the current situation that we're in. The vaccination program is an NHS-led program. The priority groups are in place. So by the 15th of February, priority groups 1 to 4 will be vaccinated. That's health and social care workers, people who live in care settings, so care homes, also over the 80s and over the age of 75. Those are the people that we are absolute #1 priority, because they are the people most at risk. It's being delivered through 2 different programs. Firstly is this primary care network sites, which are groups of GPs working together, and there are 4 sites that cover 5 primary care networks. Pictures, the photographs that you see on that is the Felton Assembly Hall, which went live today. So first vaccinations that happened in Feltham happened today, but I have to say that 2,000 of the over 80s in Feltham had already been vaccinated. They did have to travel because there was a delay on the Feltham site because it hadn't been agreed by the NHS, but the care homes have been done for a couple of weeks now. Second step is these mass vaccination sites. They are ready to go. We just need the nod from the NHS to be able to open them, and that will be based on the availability of the vaccinations. And you know, as you'll see in the media, there is a bit of a slow supply chain that's coming our way, but as they come into the borough, people are being vaccinated. And next slide, the last slide is just to sort of point out that obviously there is a bit of media attention about this delay in the second dose, and from a public health perspective, it's the right thing to do. Essentially, while rates are high, you want as many, if your main ambition is to protect lives and stop people dying, you want as many people vaccinated to have some protection rather than half of them having all the protection. Because if you look at, you know, this kind of 1,141 rate, and that is leading to a full hospital, that is only 3,000 people that is included in that rate of infection. And 3,000 people can lead to a hospital being absolutely jam-packed. If we don't get as many people partially protected as we possibly can, it means that our hospitals are going to be incredibly overwhelmed. There is a discussion about whether it's 12 weeks or 6 weeks, and quite frankly, I lead the Joint Committee for Vaccination and Immunisation, and the incredibly specialist people who deal with immunology to sort out what that particular arrangement is, and we'll just follow whatever the guidelines are. And that's the end of our presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Kelly and Sam, for a very detailed and a comprehensive presentation. I mean, it had quite a lot of critical and important information for members and members of the public and members of the forum, so thank you once again. Before I take any questions from anyone, I've got a couple of questions for yourself and Sam, Kelly. So I mean, just going back on one of the slides where you had, there was I think it was Feltham North and a couple of other wards of Hounslow Central, where you had a higher rate of cases. Is there any particular reason that you've deduced or you've alluded to why that may be? That's one. And secondly, on the vaccination, I think 2 things. I know you've mentioned a few sites where it was Felton, Bedfont, and all the Chiswick, and you said there's a few other places that are oncoming in February. It'd be good to know. It'd be good to know whether.
That's fine. That's fine. No,
Sorry,
okay.
could you mute yourself, Councillor
Area
Hanif?
Forum. Liz Mammoth's asked a question. I've just got a heads up. I've just come in. I think I've got.
Yeah, thank you.
Muted, Chair.
Sorry. Yeah. So thank you. So on the vaccination, I believe Feltham Assembly Hall was one of the potential sites. So if you, similarly for the other local sites, if you could just provide some key spots where members may need to go, that'll be good. And finally, on the vaccination again, do we have any figures of how many have been vaccinated in the borough currently? Thank you. That's all.
Okay, Sam, do you want to take the first question about why the rates of infection are high in certain areas?
Yeah, sure thing. There's a number of reasons that could be deduct why infection rates are high within these particular areas. I think a big one, I think Kelly will probably add to this too, is the proximity to Heathrow. I think the possibility of having passengers coming through, going through these areas, also those that work at Heathrow. There is the element that there is the behavioural aspect where there are possibly residents or workers in this area that aren't necessarily following the rules. I think a big factor which we've considered and looked at notably has been work that's previously done by Marmot, the Marmot review, the health inequalities element, those that have that have grown up sort of in a more deprived area, are more likely to experience sort of poorer health outcomes. I think that's an element as well, certainly within these areas. I think recently, and what we've been looking at, certainly with the data, has been the occupation element. And I think those that have been, certainly those that have been furloughed since the start of the pandemic, we have seen that there has been this trend where people are feeling the need, they have to go back into work. And, being furloughed for quite a long time and not being able to get that substantial support from a financial perspective, I think the need to go into work has been greater instead of trying to protect their health in a certain extent. So I think occupation is something that we have been trying to look at and monitor. It's quite poorly documented, but we're sort of using that insight to a better perspective as well. There is also the element that there are, within these wards, there are quite a significant number of vulnerable settings. And as Kelly mentioned before, we have seen, unfortunately, we have seen quite a few outbreaks. But those vulnerable settings sort of cover social care settings, but as well as HMOs as well and high-rise areas. But going back to what I mentioned, sort of with the postcode proportional symbol map, there is that element of intergenerational households, and again this population density as well. So I think that covers most of it. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of what Sam says. We do look at the individual line listing of cases and try to link them up and try and work out, well, what's going on and how do we identify what the issues are. But it's a combination of factors. It's no one single issue, unless, of course, if we look at sort of the care sector, there we see some, clearly some transmission going on between residents and carers. And if you have a lot of people within your community who are essential workers, their exposure level, as the Public Health England report clearly highlights, if they work in social care, if they work in shops, if they work in security, for example, or taxi drivers or drivers in general, they are more likely to be front facing and working with the public, therefore increases their risk and their exposure, and they are more likely to test positive than someone who sits at home. That's essentially it. In terms of your what you ask about, Councillor, about sort of where vaccination centres are. Feltham Assembly Hall is your primary care network site. So yeah, that went live today. That's quite a big vaccination site, so they should be vaccinating quite a lot of people. Obviously, you've got the care homes in your areas have all been done, including places like Bristol Court and sort of the extra care settings. So far, as of a couple of days ago, 1,600 of the over 80s in Feltham had been vaccinated. The stock has, as I say, has come. Quite a lot of vaccination has come directly to Feltham this week. 73% of the over 80s in the whole of the borough have been vaccinated. That accounts for just shy of 6,500 vaccinations. I would say that the NHS is responsible for where vaccines are delivered, and you'll know from the media that some of the vaccination is very difficult to move around. So we've had to basically, unfortunately, send some Felton residents over to other parts like Heart of Hounslow and Chiswick in order to get vaccinated, because that's where the NHS dropped them off, and you can't move the Pfizer vaccination. In terms of, so I've mentioned Heart of Hounslow is another site, Thornbury Road is a site, and Chiswick Health Centre is a site. But as I say, when vaccination comes in, it is, as soon as it comes in, it goes straight into somebody's arms, because you can't store it for very long, and it will be immoral to store it. So people are being called very quickly, they have to respond very quickly, and they usually only get about 48 hours notice of the vaccination being available.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for that response. So just one final thing. So is that, just to clarify, so you said 73% of the over 80s in the borough, right? Yeah. Okay, great. That's a very...
So I will just clarify that some over 80s, especially in care settings, because of the number of outbreaks that we've had, you can't vaccinate someone who's COVID positive. So we have to go back 28 days after an outbreak has occurred, or 28 days after they've tested positive, in order to vaccinate them. So if we haven't vaccinated somebody in a care home, it's because they've been COVID positive at that point in time. In terms of the 27% who haven't been done, they will definitely be done. Certainly it should be done by the 31st of January of the over 80s.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kelly. I'm not going to take any more of your time. So do we have any questions from members of the public published? Joe?
Chair, the only one which I've actually passed on to Kelly was a question received in advance about the use of Feltham Assembly Hall, the alleged leaky roof, and the difficulty with GPs actually providing the quality assurance, shall we say. And I know Kelly can respond to one element of it, and in terms of, she has advised that the Feltham Assembly Hall is open, but I'll let Kelly respond accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. So, Chair, a lot of work went into getting Feltham Assembly Hall up and running, and I have to say, while this is an NHS-led programme, it is the council that has essentially done all the work to make this happen. And actually, it's a really good job's been done, because we absolutely needed a site in Feltham, and we struggled to identify a good enough location, particularly for people with mobility issues. In terms of the quality assurance, the quality assurance for the vaccination program is standard. They can't run it without operating within the standard operating procedures for a site, and there is quality and inspection carried out at all sites. I think one of the questions was about patient participation group. I think it was about patient participation group within general practice. If there is a concern about that, I suggest that whoever asked the question contacts the primary care network, and I'm happy to offline give the information as to who is best to contact, because that's an issue for the NHS and primary care.
Thank you, Kelly. So, I'm sure all the necessary procedures have been carried out by the council, and all the quality assurance has been carried out before that was selected as one of the sites. So, so if that was all we have from members of the public, I would like to...
Chair, with your agreement, Councillor Hina Mir has said she can't connect with her camera. And with your agreement, can we ask the following question? She'd like to know the nearest location to vaccination for residents residing near Felton West and the surrounding areas. And are we taking any measures to make the residents aware of where they are most likely to be able to there to call calls to vaccination, when they will be getting their calls to vaccination? Thank you, Chair. In the chat.
Thank you for reading that, Joe. I was going to go in sequence of the sequence that with the councillors had put in a D, but now that's been mentioned, Kelly, could you please answer that?
Yes, the closest vaccination for a mobile vulnerable person, the closest site for anybody will be Feltham Assembly Hall. And that is purely for the vulnerable community. For the mass population, the site that will be closest will be the site that there will be at sort of close to London Heathrow. And I can't tell you where it is because it's an NHS and they don't allow me to actually identify in public where it is, but it will be near Heathrow, and it's be a shared facility with Hillingdon. There is another mass vaccination site which will be a little bit smaller, which will be towards the east of the borough. Yeah, so there will be, it's accessible, but I would say that it is, you know, for people who are truly housebound, they are being vaccinated at home.
Thank you. So I'll take Councillor Hanif, and yeah, okay, Councillor Hanif.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. First of all, great presentation, and I think I speak for most of the residents of Feltham, Hanworth, etc. in the wider area that you guys have been doing a fantastic job. It's not an easy job to do, so that's one thing. Secondly, the vaccination process is going on, and I appreciate it's an NHS, but there is also the stuff about the testing as well, the lateral flow tests as well, which are also going on, where we've got lots of different centres. I wanted to just ask questions in relation to the makeup of the population that is actually, and I know you haven't got the figures to hand. I saw Sam mention about the Indian population, but you weren't able to effectively document who's coming or not, and I'm just wondering, as that community is so disproportionately affected, and we've learnt so much about that scenario in terms of not only that if they had diabetes, they'll be affected more, if they had blood, the whole scenario of their health. Now, I was wondering how important is that to actually find that information more so, because as we come out of this recovery, we then need to take the learnings from that and understand how that then relates to the wider public, and what then in terms of a recovery do we need to invest in the health of our population. So that was my question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, Councillor. Yeah, it's taking all of our time to respond to this, but you'd expect that as a pandemic. In terms of engagement with particular community groups, the lack of data is always a problem, but it's not the means by which we stop acting. We know the problems. You can apply the problems. You know, don't just need to focus on this particular area to know that there are certain community groups that need to be targeted in a very different way. And that's why our comms have been very specific about, you know, a universal approach, but a specific approach, you know, and looking at sort of postcode areas and really targeting some of our information so it goes through specific doors where we see that there is a cause for problem, as a problem that is emerging, and we want to target people for testing, and obviously with vaccination. And you'll all see in the media that certain groups in the population are a little bit more difficult to engage in the vaccination program, but our main point is to provide really good information, to warn and inform. And actually part of what we have learned is actually engagement with faith groups is incredibly important. And I've just recruited 2 people who are representative of the communities in the borough, who will start to work with our community champions, who will start to work with community groups, and develop an understanding of how do you engage those groups to start thinking about how they can protect themselves, how they can work with us, what would make them more likely to access testing and access a vaccination centre, and starting to work with them in terms of their views and their needs rather than our perception of what their needs are. So that's work in progress, and obviously as we come into the recovery plan, having that sort of those engagement officers as we move towards and the integrated system, having sort of greater focus on the comorbidities and the health and social inequalities that COVID has shone a spotlight on, will be absolutely essential, because I think the days or when the sort of NHS and local authorities were focused on sort of a one-size-fits-all are well and truly gone, and our recovery plan certainly recognises that. So work in progress, still a lot of work to do, but a recognition that we've started to develop our work in the right direction and truly started to engage in a meaningful way with our population groups.
Thank you, Kelly. Just to follow up on that, there was I believe there were some details on a lateral flow testing tests, which were much more rapid. Is there any detail on that, or is it something I missed?
Yeah, we've got a number of sites that are doing lateral flow. This is these rapid sort of tests that you get the results in within 40 minutes. Yeah, so we've got quite a few mass testing sites, one at Hounslow House, one at Staines Rugby Club, one at Isleworth Library, one at Heston Library. Those are static sites. On top of that, we've also got 2 mobile units that are going to businesses and various parts of our borough. It's kind of chasing where the data tells us to go as well. And on top of that, we've rolled it out. It predates the Department for Education, but we've rolled it out to primary and secondary schools in line with government guidance. And we're just in the process of just making sure that those testing sites can accommodate early years testing. So the more people that we can get tested, the better, because it gives us a much better picture. One, a much better picture of what the nature of the virus transmission in the population is, and 2, we can get those people who test positive into isolation. And I suppose the new thing this week is that you don't have to have a confirmatory PCR. You don't need to go to a drive-through or walk-through if you test positive on lateral flow now, because it is very good at detecting positive cases.
Great. Are these information on these particular centres available on the borough website?
Yes, it's all there.
Okay, great. So I'm just gonna take Councillor Joanna George.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair, and I hope you're all keeping well and safe. One of the questions I had, it was for the housebound and disabled residents, but already Kelly answered that they're going to be vaccinated by the GPs at their homes, right?
So I couldn't hear the last bit. The housebound
or disabled residents. So they will have to get in touch with the GPs.
No, the housebound, the truly housebound, and I think we have to be really clear about that. We are encouraging anyone who is mobile, who can get in somebody's car, to actually go to a vaccination centre. But GPs are the one that identify those people. Sometimes they get it wrong. And we have actually accommodated that, so we've changed the housebound list. But where people are housebound, particularly, and there are lots of people within our borough who have carers, particularly who stay indoors the whole time because they are too unwell to go out. Then GPs and nurses are doing housebound, and I think they're meant to be finished by the end of this week. I think the 31st.
Right.
So the GP will get in touch with them. They don't need to get in touch with the GP.
Sure. Thank you, Kelly. I have another question specifically in Bedfont, because it is very worrying for me being a councillor, with 1,084 cases being the 9th highest on the borough. I wanted to know what protocols we can put in place to ensure that we minimise the infection risks. That's one of the questions.
Okay, shall I take that one first? So that number is the total number since February.
Since February, yes.
Yeah, so it's
high, because I've seen on the map.
Yes, at the moment, at the moment we've just got higher rates in sort of in that area.
Yes.
So protocols are very clear. Hand, space and space. The national stuff, it still applies, absolutely still applies. So washing your hands, having a mask on, social distancing. Social distancing is by far the most important. No one of those will do everything. So the rules are that, well, the guidelines are you have to do all of that. You can't just one of them. It's a combination of those factors. 2, getting the rates of infection. If you can get people into lockdown and people not moving around unnecessarily, if they work and they're key workers, then yeah, fair enough. But actually there is still lots of people that are still out and about, still doing things that perhaps are a little bit unnecessary, because it's meant to be essential journeys only. Then that will bring that will bring the rate of infection down. But as I say, viruses spread, you know, it moves in waves, so you just see ongoing transmission. So interesting, last week, and I was talking to Sam about this earlier on today, is that when we did the area forum for Hounslow and Heston last week, that was the area that by far in that 7 days had the highest rate. Okay, so it just moves around, and it will move around again. So if you look in 7 days' time, the dynamics of where the greatest number of infections are as that rate reduces is likely to be different. But if people follow the rules, if they do all of those things, then that rate will actually reduce.
Sure. Do we have any PCN sites in Bedfont specifically? Because I know we do have an elderly population there also who can probably find it hard to travel to Feltham.
No, the sites that we have is Feltham Assembly Hall, which covers that whole PCN group. It was very difficult. I have to say that while it wasn't my decision, it's an NHS decision about which site. We did struggle to find a site for that PCN, and it had to be only one site for each PCN. So we weren't allowed to do any more, and that's because of the fact that the vaccine that we're using is a little bit unstable, and it can't be moved to multiple places.
Okay, great. And the second one, I'll be very quick. Have we targeted, do we have any reports from Feltham young offenders? Because I know are there any rates in there of COVID? Are we aware of that?
We know that there are continual small outbreaks, and interestingly, I did have a flag from Public Health England today, because Public Health England have been dealing with the ongoing response to outbreaks in various prison and custodial centres. So at the moment, we've started to think about how do we transition over to taking some more responsibility for the young offenders site and looking at regular testing. So we know that regular testing does go on, but as going forward in the next couple of weeks, we'll transition that from Public Health England into the local authority. So it's work in progress.
So
okay,
thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess.
You're welcome.
Councillor Javed Akhundzada.
Hello, thank you, Kelly and Sam. It was really informative presentation and very concerning as well at the same time. Part of my question was already asked by Councillor Adriana Georgi, but just as you have mentioned in your presentation that some of the reason of this spread is of course the density of the population, then the job occupancy, and the third one I would say is the economic deprived areas where we have problems. People can't afford all these to follow the guidelines, and plus they have to go to their job to have food on their tables. But as Adriana have asked, I was just wondering, especially after this data, which is now available to all of us, that these are the major factors which are causing the spread. Priority, should be given to these areas where all these factors are affecting that. As Adriana have just said about the vaccination center, which is thanks now Feltham Assembly Hall is accessible to most of them, but then the vaccination centers as well. If we have any plans to have more a testing center near Bedfont or Feltham North, so that more testing we will have, we can kind of reduce the spread.
Yeah, so I take that on board, and certainly we'll look into how we do that. I would just say that one of the factors that we didn't say is that some people, I don't know how many, because obviously we don't know how many people don't get tested who are symptomatic, but we do know that some of the issues that we're having in the borough are due to economic challenges that people have, and people do know that if they are symptomatic they should get tested, but they also know that if you get tested and you test positive you have to isolate, and sometimes that is not economically a position that people want to be in, despite having access to a grant. Unfortunately that does happen, and we also know, because we've, even today we have had a number of reported cases where we know that household members of positive cases have not been isolating, have still gone to work, and we've had to follow that up, and that's about supporting rather than enforcing, but actually we will enforce those requirements because it's the law. But we know that happens, and we follow them up when we know about it.
Thank you, Kelly. I hope this answered Councillor Javid's question. We've got Councillor Kamal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to firstly thank Kelly and Sam for the presentation. Really informative. Giving us the latest information, so that's really really useful to hear. Also, just wanted to also say good news about Feltham Assembly Hall going live today. So I'm glad we've got that up and running in this part of the borough. And my question is, the areas that have been identified as having higher rates or being more affected, what additional measures are being put in place to monitor the situation, to maybe create more awareness, or just generally to bring the rates of infection down? And also, what steps have you found to be the most effective in kind of curbing the spread? Thank you.
Okay, there's two. So Sam works with the enforcement team, and they have meetings pretty much on a daily basis to identify where enforcement's going to be targeted. So it's a little bit of carrot and stick as well that goes into this. So there are lots of targeted communications that we send to those places that are consistently high. And when I say, when we look at Bedfont has only just emerged in the last, how many days do you think, Sam? Less than 7 days, really, that we started to see this increase.
Yeah.
Okay, and this kind of dynamic, particularly when rates are decreasing, there's a number of factors that contribute to that. So most of the time when we actually do this piece of work where we target communities, we're looking for an area that is consistently high, because that's where an ongoing problem exists. So when that actually happens, there is targeted communications through Ben Knowles and his team, letter drops as required. We have put mobile testing sites when we were using them as the sole means by which we test into those areas as a kind of pop-up testing site, and those are the kind of things in terms of the carrot, the supporting, the recognizing that's a difficult thing, and to engage the communities. But as I said, we will enforce the legal requirements through our enforcement teams and through the police when we find out that people are flouting the rules, because actually this is about public health and protecting population health. And when we start looking at the number of people that die, this is about saving lives. And it sounds a bit dramatic, but actually, as you've seen in the graphics that Sam has presented, keeping the rates of infection low means that we have fewer people that die.
Thank you, Kelly. So in the interest of time, I'm going to try speed this up, and could I remind the councillors to make their questions very precise and concise, and to allow the officers to answer within the given time. We do have quite a few items on the agenda. Okay, so we've got a couple of more questions, and I think that should be it on this item. So we've got, do we have any figures in enforcement for non-compliance, and if so, are we finding that more people are generally complying with the lockdown restrictions? Councillor Puneet. Kelly.
Yeah, the majority of people are absolutely doing the right thing, but you only got to get a few that who are not following the rules, and that can cause chaos. So yes, actually I was speaking to the enforcement team this morning. Across the borough we've had roughly about 40 penalty notices, and I think throughout the pandemic, what we've tried to be is supportive and engage, and prevent and be a critical friend, understand that people are in difficult positions. But as these rates have increased nationally and in London, that's when the penalty has to come out. So there's been roughly about 40 penalty notices issued, but the majority since lockdown started so far. There'll be more.
Okay, that's great. I believe that was all the questions that we've had. That gives us just perfect timing to move on to the following item. I'm not sure whether Kelly or Sam are required to stay until the open forum, but I mean, Joe, are you aware whether there are any other questions that they may need to answer in the open forum that have been pre-submitted?
No, Chair, there was only the one about Feltham Assembly Hall, and Kelly and Sam have addressed that one. So with your agreement, they're free to go.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. I mean, thank you very much, Sam.
Chair, I was trying to get in, but unfortunately, I got blocked out and had to go out and reboot and everything. So I've got a very quick question for Kelly. Reference HMOs in Hamworth, the C3 HMOs in Hamworth. All of these HMOs are supposed to be licensed and recorded in London Borough of Hounslow, but I wouldn't guarantee it. But obviously, especially the ones in the Alders, Swan Road and Swan Close, they are very tiny premises with people living in extremely confined space within houses which were, they've got 5 in, but the houses were built to take 3. So I don't know, are we actually sort of investigating these directly?
Yes, so we know, I think it's two answers there. Is that yes, when we know about HMOs, we know about them and we've done something about them, and we're also notified and can identify where cases emerge and link the postcodes. The difficulty is that when we don't know about HMOs and we don't have a record of them, because what you don't know is that a 1 or 2 cases that emerge in a house could be any house, but when we see the same address repeating, we follow that up. So it may be that a whole number of people, again, it goes back to the fact though that they have to go and get tested for us to identify them. So rather than tell me in a kind of public form, Councillor Foot, if you can drop me an email and let me know of the areas of concern, we can check them against our database to confirm that we know about them.
Yep, that's fine, Kelly. No problem. Thank you.
Okay, just last but not least, Councillor Ahmed, that'll be the last question.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Ahmed. Sorry, I couldn't introduce myself before. It wasn't allowing me to. So first of all, I would like to thank Kelly and Sam for this amazing presentation. So the question I wanted to ask was, what are the capacities of local hospitals, for example, West Middlesex? So is it fully occupied, or what percentage of it is occupied?
That's a difficult question to answer. What I can say is that the intensive care is pretty full. And remember that hospitals don't work in isolation of each other. That's why sort of we have a North West London CCG and critical care networks. They look at all of the sort of hospitals within a vicinity and wider, and they make the best use of the available capacity. It does mean that sometimes that's patients have to be or people have to be transferred to other hospitals in order to get the right care, or to allow a hospital to focus on the complexity of people that are already in patients. Obviously it's winter time. So hospitals, the NHS is always very, very busy at winter. This has exacerbated the difficulty, the number of cases that we have. But actually what we have done is worked very, very effectively as a health and social care system to provide enhanced levels of care within the community, and to support people within the community, within general practice, within these respiratory hubs, with our community nursing and community NHS services by working together to focus where resource can be targeted in order to keep people safely at home, and for only those people who need to go into hospital to go into hospital. Obviously, there are a lot of people at the moment that need to go into the hospital, but it's while West Middlesex, if it becomes incredibly difficult at West Middlesex, the network around it will start to sort of kick in. So hospitals do not work in isolation of each other. They work together in order to make the best use of the combined resource that they have.
Thank you, Kelly. Could I just remind all councillors to turn off their cameras once you've finished speaking, and when until you're speaking also. Okay, thank you very much, Kelly and Sam, once again. I mean, I would like to thank you on behalf of all members of the public and the forum on the very detailed, and I mean, you can see there's a lot of hard work being put into the presentation, and there's a lot of useful data in terms of figures, and of course on the vaccination and the priorities that are, and all the locations within the vicinity that are available. But yeah, thank you very much, and I mean, yeah, and you're not obliged to stay, but once again, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Okay, just gonna move on to the next item on the agenda. So once again, may I just remind all councillors to only turn on their cameras and unmute when they're asked to speak, and please do introduce yourself before speaking. So agenda item 4, so we've got the local police update, and so we now move on to that particular item, and we've got Police Sergeant Dave Vokes with us.
Good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the councillors. I'm hoping that you can hear me, just to check to make sure that you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. For those that don't know, I am the sergeant covering the Hamworth, Bedfont and Feltham areas of Hounslow. Currently, a little bit of a structure information about how the police work out of Feltham, especially the DWOs. I'm responsible for 8 PCs and 5 PCSOs that are directly under my command, and they are the dedicated ward officers for the 5 individual wards. In terms of the actual strength, we should have 10 PCs, and we are currently waiting for some officers to return from sickness and also maternity leave to bring us back up to the strength of 10 PCs. At the moment, and until the end of May, we currently have 2 officers that have been posted with me on development attachments. They are initially in their 2 years of policing career, and they are currently out with experienced officers learning community policing. In addition to that, I'm supported by 2 other teams, one being the Hounslow Council policing team, a team of 1 sergeant and 10 PCs, and also the neighbourhood tasking team, which is again 1 sergeant and 10 PCs. These are teams that are split across the entire borough, and in order for me to use them, I have to bid for them into the central process in order for them to come down and deal with problems that I've identified or my officers have. And these are based on a hotspots across the borough. So sometime a problem might be an issue for myself, but it might be actually a slightly lower risk than somewhere else. But I do have the support of that. Moving on to some figures over the last 12 months, as you are all probably aware that the policing has come under some pressures, not as much as the NHS, but we have certainly had some pressures. And the change in crime figures, which were in the pack, represent obviously a change in social habits. So therefore, a lot of the figures are actually shown down compared to the previous 12 months. Burglary is overall showing us 45 fewer victims across the 5 different wards, all receiving a reduction of some sort. That could be down to a number of issues around people being at home more. Premises have become a little bit too difficult to burgle. So which in my opinion is a good thing, but we've also increased our patrols as and when we possibly can, so it has seen a reduction. In terms of robbery has also overall seen 12 fewer victims. There is a case of Bedfont which has unfortunately seen an increase. There have been some challenges down there. The increase amounts to three additional offences on the previous 12 months. Looking at the cases, none of them appear to be isolated. None of them seem to be linked. They do seem to be isolated incidents.
Sorry, Dave, could you just hold on there for a second? Could I ask the IT team to confirm the presentation is also live, and it's not myself that's live?
Chair, it's now live because we can all see it. But I think he needs to take it off because he's sharing everything. Rob, you need to.
Yeah, yeah, we can see it if you just go back to the presentation.
Yeah.
Apologies, thank you. Can I continue, Chair? Is that okay?
Please do.
Can I have the next slide, please? This is robbery, which shows you what I was just talking about.
Sorry, could someone zoom in a little more to the data? I can't really see it clearly. Could you zoom in a little? That's better.
So you will see for Bedfont being the only ward that saw an increase this year. Looking at the crimes, out of those 16, 4 of them were actually detected. None of them are grouped incidences or link series that we have to be overly concerned about. I am concerned that robbery is going up, and I have, through our tasking team, asked for an increase in patrols around the Bedfont area. However, this is a whole year's worth of data, so it could well be that the problem was at the beginning of last year, at which I only came in July, so there may have been some changes around then. Next slide, please. This is vehicle offences. Is this the next slide? It doesn't appear to be.
Could we change slides, Rob?
That's the one. Thank you. This is vehicle offences. Overall, there has been 46 fewer offences. However, there are a couple of hotspots that do seem to have been unfortunately targeted. Felton West and Hamworth Park are the two that have seen quite a large increase. We have looked, and it appears to be not the majority, but there are quite a few of the catalytic converters being stolen, and also mopeds and motorbikes being stolen and ridden around, which is a difficulty. Some people do think that actually the theft of motor vehicles that we don't really do much about, but in my experience, the vehicles are registered on the police national computer, and quite quickly they are flagged up. The number plate does get flagged up, and they can be picked up across the country of ANPR cameras. And just to give an example, a few years back, a car was stolen in Chiswick, I believe it was, and within 2 hours it pinged up on an ANPR system in Dover and was just about to be exported. So there is some advantage around the vehicles being reported, even though it may not appear straight away that the police are interested or doing anything, but they are circulated almost instantly onto the national computer and can be flagged up if it comes across, and if it's tracked down on the motorway or road network. Again, also we're finding cars being left unlocked is another way of people gaining access, and that is just something that really is to try and emphasize people to make sure that they lock their cars. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, thank you.
Just while you're there, you may have to zoom a little more.
It's the next one up, I'm afraid. It's the one with, unfortunately, all the red on it. That one, please. Thank you. It shows our violence against the persons, which is an assaults and some other offences that occur. As you can see, there has been every single ward has had an effect. There has been 137 more offences. Looking into this, I can't go into all nearly 1,000, 2,000 offences that there are, but just looking at them, a lot of them are without injury. It's not an excuse, however, it is looking at the severity of the incidences, it is at the lower level. Also included in this is the number of domestic incidences. Incidences between partners, siblings do occur quite often, and looking at it, they do look to be roughly 50% domestic incidents to non-domestic. The instances that we can deal with in terms of the non-domestic abuse type of incidences require increased patrols, which we have done over the last especially over the last 6 months, and tried to target across the whole of the sector, all 5 wards. However, it is sometimes quite difficult to be able to be there at the time it takes place. We do rely heavily on our colleagues from the emergency response teams who work 24/7, and they do pick up a lot of these. But it was really this for me made it quite surprising that the fact that we've had lockdowns that actually we've still seen an increase in offences. And finally, if I can have the final slide.
Chair, can someone put the microphone on mute because we can hear some.
It's now been muted.
And finally, this is the drug offences. Now, drug offences can be looked at in a number of ways. One, the offending that's taking place in the area, but it's also the level of productivity and a result of police tactics. An example of that is Bedfont. Bedfont showing green. It could look at 2 things. It looks at the number of stop and search that may have taken place in that area and the reduction in the number of crimes. Whereas Felton West and the other wards may have seen a slight increase. We're talking 1 or 2 additional offences. This can be sometimes as a result of information that we've received and we are policing those areas. So the stop and searches do actually result in positive outcomes in terms of we're arresting people and dealing with them, in whether it be by community resolution, through requisition, or actually arresting them. There are different options that we do have available for us, but it does show that in Hamworth Park, I think it is, Feltham North and Felton West, we have tried concentrating our behaviours on that. And I personally know, because I've been out there with the officers of Bedfont, and they are completing their stop and searches and dealing with the people in there. The drug offences also includes warrants, that where we might find offences where drugs are being trafficked, and by that it's about the possession with intent to supply offences. So that is the overall of the crime in the last 12 months, and it has had, and as we're all aware, that COVID has had an impact on policing. We have received more and more ASB calls over the last 12 months, because that is where the category of COVID calls come in. We've had an increase, officers have had an increase in the number of COVID deaths that we have to go to in order to see if there's anything untowards. It's just a general part of the course. If someone out in the community passes away, we tend to go, and there's been a lot more work around having to deal with people that have sadly passed away. And if they are COVID positive, or if they have symptoms, then we do have a different way that we have to deal with that situation. Initially, calls and everything had reduced. During lockdown 1, we had seen a reduction in both crime, and looking at compared on the 12-week period to the previous year, crime had been down. However, looking at the last 12 months, that's January to December 2020 compared to the previous months, we actually had over 6,500 calls to police that were categorised either immediate, requiring police response within 15 minutes, or significant where police's response is required in within an hour. That is not the borough, that is just for those 5 wards that we've got. And that is actually a 4% increase on the previous year. So our emergency calls have actually gone up over that time when people think that we have, that actually there's been a reduction. So our demands have actually been quite significant. On top of that, we've also had to backfill our colleagues on emergency response teams because where people have had to self-isolate, we have had to backfill on that. And in addition to that, we've also then been tasked to do the checks for the Home Office around people knocking on, making sure people are compliant when they first initially came into the country from a holiday. What we've also done is we've obviously been out enforcing. That is our primary role over the last 12 months when it comes to COVID, is to ensure that we engage, explain, encourage, and then finally enforce. As you will see over the last couple of months, that enforcement we moved to quite quickly. However, it's down to the officer's judgment on there that the breaches are taking place. I am fully aware that there are complications. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you how many COVID tickets that the officers have issued. That is a question that I did put before this meeting to see if I could get some answers. Unfortunately, the team that were dealing with all the information hasn't got back to me. But if I do get that information and I'm allowed to release it, then I will obviously do so. However, all that, my officers have done some quite good work in the last 12 months. Give you an example, tackling the ASB on the wards. Significant ASB enables us to possibly close what is called closure orders. We've managed to close 6 premises down. That's all full closures where people can't return to the address in 6 months because of the antisocial behaviour that is being committed in the area. We've had 2 in Hamworth. We've had 2 in Feltham, North Felton. We have recently had 1 in Felton West, and we're currently in the process of getting a couple of others across the area. It is hard work, it is long work, and it does require officers being able to get those victims to contact us and pass on that valuable information so that we can then process the applications. We have to go to court, it's our prosecution, and we have to produce the evidence in order to get those closure orders. A couple of other bits of good news that we're working on. We've spoken to our own teams internally, and we have managed to get an additional 7 CCTV cameras put up across the borough, which is actually police cameras that we're able to view and respond to from the office. There are currently 5 in Hamworth Park, and there's currently 2 in Hamworth, and that is giving us some great information that we're able to do. There's recently an incident where a car was identified using these cameras. If we didn't have before, we wouldn't have been able to, but we were able to identify a full registration number plate of a car, and it's that addition that we're having at the moment, which is working really well in order for us to be able to combat crime. Particular cameras in Hamworth Park, it is reduced antisocial behaviour in some areas. It has displaced it, and we're looking at seeing our next tactics about how we are going to address that. And finally, we're currently, and I know that this is a big question for some of them, we are aware of dealing with the Hamworth Park, Crane Park and Hounslow Heath, which isn't our ward, but I'll touch on that, around the ASB relating to motorbikes and the usage of motorbikes. This isn't a recent problem. I was here as a PC over 10 years ago. And the places where I am now being having to address as a sergeant is still taking place. It is a very difficult thing for us to do. We've got enforcement, we can deal with enforcement, we can try and get down there. Unfortunately, we can go in the area and they will disperse. They will go on the bikes, and we can't track them. However, we have recently had some information around a potential offender, which we are currently looking at and working towards, and seeing whether we can use any legislation currently in order to prosecute them for. But it is a very, very difficult problem for us to solve. We don't have the resources, i.e. scrambler bikes, to go chasing them. We can't go chasing them. There is a lot of there's a lot of protocol that you go by in order to pursue somebody, and we don't have the bikes. In order for us to get those resources centrally, we can ask people to come across from the road and transport team, but unfortunately we have to bid them, and we're up against the other 31 boroughs in the Met Police area, so it's very, very difficult to try and get those specialist resources across. I'm going to try and see if I can get a contact in there and try and get somebody to come across to give us a hand. And I think finally, really, before I have any questions, we are looking to increase our what's called ward panel members, and if anybody wants to be able to speak to us on a local level, which is once every 4 months, once every quarter, we are able to give and be able to have a meeting where we can discuss problems and try and solve problems at a local level. All my officers, we have an email address that everybody could email if they wanted to find that out. And in the next couple of weeks, officers are going to send out an email, which will be from myself, inviting people, if they're interested, to become part of that family in order to sign themselves up. So that should be coming out shortly. And my last point, we are finding an increase of emails coming in, or phone calls coming into the office about incidents that are happening either there and then or a day earlier. The problem we have with our offices is we will work shifts, so we don't get notified about those incidents until 2 or 3 days later. So the one thing that I would advocate is people please use 101 or 999 if it is life-threatening. We are not there 24/7, and if something happened, and I'll give you an example, last week we had a call about a house party. It got emailed in and the officers were off for 4 days and didn't get picked up until afterwards. It's these things that we need reporting, so that it builds up a picture of what's going on, and my officers can actually make can make progress on that, but also it is the correct channels to go down. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dave. That was a very detailed, and I appreciate the breakdown of all the different type of cases per ward that you had there. It was a great comparison. It highlights exactly where we stand for individual wards and for individual councillors that are watching, and of course for the members of public. Yeah, okay. I was just gonna say your camera was off, and now we can see you. Great.
Yeah, apologies for that. I only realised right at the end, and I've had my hair cut personally for this today. So
you look great, Dave. Okay, great. So without taking any more of your time, I'm gonna move on to some questions that the council is gonna have for you. So I've got Councillor Adriana George to start.
Thank you, Chair. My question was specifically in Bedfont, because I understood from Dave that is a high increase in the rate, and what is the reason, do you reckon, of this high increase of and then especially we had 4 cases detected. Of course they were isolated, they were
so
not linked.
That's robbery. It's not a high increase. There were 58 offences in the previous year, I believe, and it is an addition of 3 offences. So in the last year it was 55. So obviously because there's an increase, that's how come it shows red on the screen. It doesn't really show the severity of that in terms of a sliding scale. It literally is dark red if it's over I don't know, 25%, and medium. So it doesn't really give a true representative of actually the increase in crime. As I said, I looked through those. There are some similarities around scooters and push bikes being the items that people are trying to steal. And I could only see 2 of offences where a knife was mentioned. It doesn't mean that out of those 58 offences that knives were used more. It was just out of the quick look that I could see that knives were being used, but there was only I think 2 or 3. So in terms of Bedfont for robbery, yes, there's been an increase, but it's only been a 3 offence increase on that year. That's a whole year. And again, there doesn't seem to be any link series as if there's anything too serious about it, but it was a problem.
Thank you, Dave. Another question I have, it's regarding the drug offences and what strategies we can put in place, because lately, even on this pandemic, I have been approached by residents, specifically New Road and further down Page area. What we can put in place, what strategies we can put so we can minimise these risks.
So one of the good things that has happened, well, I say it's a good thing. We did have a drug hotspot down at Burlington Close for some time that caused us a bit of a problem, because the area had slowly been closed down due to redevelopment. People were using that area in order to gather. So there is an element that it's been sort of displaced over on towards New Road, Page Road. My officers are down there every day trying to get them. It is, again, you know, the makeup of Page Road and New Road, it's quite dense in terms of building lines, and my officers are down there patrolling, and I even asked the neighbouring ward of Feltham North to pop along when their shifts are not aligned. So we are trying to get in there and pursue. I have asked the neighbourhood tasking team, which is relatively new, to go down there and increase their stop and search and increase in their police powers. And also we're looking at the addresses which have become more noticeable for not necessarily supplying, but being in the vicinity of alleged supplying that's taking place, and seeing whether there's any action we can take of using the Antisocial Behaviour Act, using the closure orders that we can, to try and see whether we can look at some additional enforcement. We're also speaking to possible housing associations to see whether we can look at an approach where we can speak with them to do the enforcement as well. So we are looking at it. Drugs, we can go down there, clear it all up, next day and a whole new batch come in. So we're not doing anything. It's just taking a little bit longer than we are planning, or that we know one address that's come to notice recently.
Yeah,
it is, yeah, and that's being dealt with, and we're looking at a possible closure order. The key thing is to keep informing us, is to keep the information coming in, so that
that's why I say to the residents, ring 101 and report it, and if you can, risk management, take a video and then share it with the police.
Yeah, I would never say, yeah, absolutely, from the safe distance.
Risk management, yeah,
never ever get out there and get in front of them with the camera, because that's the wrong way to do it. But if they can, and they can keep diary sheets of when it happens and let us know, in order for us to go and get a warrant at an address, is we need evidence, or we need intelligence. If we don't get these phone calls into 101, then we can't go to a magistrate and say, Your Honour, we need a warrant at this address.
I'm aware of that.
I've only got hearsay from residents. So it may seem, oh, what's the point of ringing police, because they're never going to do anything, but actually we need the intelligence in order to build the picture and be able to progress it. In addition to that, I forgot to mention, we also have Hounslow Council team who are quite regularly down there. One of the officers on that team was originally a Bedfont ward officer, so he knows the area quite well, and I do know that they do pop down there. And there was actually recently, in the last couple of months, a warrant at the address, an address in Page Road, which we've just come back with the quantities of drugs. So we're hoping that will be progressed shortly.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it.
That's okay.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Dave. We do have a few more questions. So may I remind all councillors to limit the number of questions that you have, so we can just to enable the rest of the councillors on the floor fair amount of time to get in their questions. So we've got a question for Councillor Puneet Gurewal. So this is for yourself, Dave. Again, it's no surprise that burglaries are down, but offences against the person, drug offences, and vehicle theft have increased. Can we ensure a greater police presence, or is there simply not enough funding? What can we do to assist?
So in terms of the increases, the offences of drugs is slightly different, because that is actually a measure of police activity to some extent, because we're out there doing the stop and search. There is no offence of drugs unless we find the drugs. So it is an increase. Is actually we're out there dealing with it. In terms of the robbery, again, briefly mentioned that there is a 3 offence increase, and yes, the most troubling one is the assaults against, violence against the persons and the theft from motor vehicle. Increasing patrols. I have asked my officers to do it countless of times. I've been out there. I'm very much a person that wants to be out with my team and being out there and trying to patrol the areas. Elements of, especially the theft from motor vehicles, that sometimes can occur overnight or over a period of 3 or 4 days where a car's left. It's quite difficult in order to police that, because we would have to be in a road almost 24/7. And then if we're in a road 24/7, they wouldn't be there because we're police officers. So it's quite a difficult one to police. The violence is a case of that we are out on patrol. Some of these are low level offences that have taken place maybe at a work location, or it may have taken place in the street. The street ones we can deal with through visible policing, which we have tried doing and we are tried doing. I've got 8 officers, or if you say let's look at a particular ward, I have 2 officers and a PCSO to cover that entire ward. Yes, I do have emergency response team colleagues, but they are a borough resource and they are likely to go up and down. So there are challenges that we have, but I have increased patrols especially over the last 6 months since I've been in post, in order to make sure people are out there either on foot, on bikes, and very much if we've got a car to be out there. If they come across something straight away, it's quite difficult if they have to arrest somebody, that is their shift then tied up. So there is very much, it is the visible aspect of it can very much end before as soon as it starts, because of the issues that we have around processes of arresting people. We do tend to not try and arrest, and we try and deal with them through other means that we have, i.e. asking them to come in for interviews later on, or we deal with them on the street where we can basically process them to court. We can increase patrols. As I said, I've asked my team to do that as much as possible, and I can only think that we can increase that, or try and increase it as much as possible without taking away from the other areas that we have to deal with and police.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, so we've still got a few more questions, and I will take the last question from Councillor Allen eventually, but no more questions after that. But before I go on to that, so we've got a question from
Chair.
So who's this?
Sorry, Chair, it's Councillor Gurewal. Can I just ask one follow-up, hopefully not very long question?
Okay, as long as it's very short, so we can give the rest of the team a chance.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Officer, for the presentation. All very helpful. I know, because I'm involved with the courts and cases around this area and often appear at Isleworth Crown Court, that there is an increase in cultivation of cannabis and all other drug offences, whereby human trafficking is an issue. NRM, the National Referral Mechanism, being engaged, it's sometimes being improperly engaged. My question is that surely the intelligence then leads to identifying individuals, and or residents are key in this process. But is it the case that when you're finding there's an increase in drug crime, that in fact it is that sort of crime the trafficking, growing cannabis and the like? And is there any way in which we as the councillors can assist in cracking down on this, or effectively just ensuring that the community teams are patrolling those specific areas?
I mean, they can. A lot of the cannabis factories that take place are behind closed doors, so we do rely heavily on the information in order to go and conduct a warrant at the location. There are offences. Let me try and think. We have been to addresses, and one recently where a suspect was identified at the location and was prosecuted. But we do tend to sometimes not have people on there, or at times we can put people through to the CPS and their decision is not to prosecute for one reason or another, or there isn't sufficient evidence that they were there, that there wasn't sufficient evidence in order to follow through the prosecution. But it is a case of, if there is suspicion that a premises is being used to cultivate cannabis, then it is fed into us either through Crime Stoppers or 101, or speaking to an officer on the street. There is a very distinctive smell about it, so we are able to look at it, but we need to make sure that we get that information in so that we can progress. I know of a handful of cannabis factories that have occurred in my 6 months here, but no doubt that there are a lot more that there are out and about there.
Thanks, Dave. So we've just following up with another question from Councillor Umair. So the question is, are neighbourhood watch teams still in operation during pandemic, and how many members do we have in neighbour watch team, and is there any increase? And as residents are still getting updates via text and emails, or are residents still getting text via?
As far as the neighbour, I mean, I don't have the figures with me around the neighbourhood watch. There is the ward panels, and there's also the OWL system, which is the neighbourhood watch, or not neighbourhood messaging service that we put out asking people to contact us if they've got information or giving them crime prevention advice. In terms of the neighbourhood watches, as far as I'm aware, that they may well been suspended, but there are people that are part of the neighbourhood watch that still can contact us, and we do feed back information to residents via OWL, which is our not new, but it's a system that we use to notify people of crime or incidences that may have taken place.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Dave. So Councillor Atherton had to leave, so I'll just read her question out to you. Really pleased to hear about the ward panels starting up again. My question was about ASB around fireworks season and what can be done to protect residents this year, but can ask this another time. But yeah, of course.
I can quickly throw out there part of the policing plan for that week. That 14-day period is quite intense. So much so that the officers are actually only got 1 day off in that 14-day period between bonfire night and Halloween, because we look at it in conjunction as both of them. All officers are actually told that they can't take leave, so there are officers out there this year that they were all put out on foot patrol or in a van in order to combat that. Fireworks is we do try and get down to those where they're being used illegally. We had an incident, I believe, down on Hamworth, which we tried to deal with. We turned up and they all scarpered. So it's really, really difficult to be able to try and police that. And unless you've got the whole of somewhere like the Butts Farm estate all locked down in order to catch them, it's really, really difficult. We do have our increase in calls do go up over that period for that reason. And we do go out and respond as much as possible to calls. And as I said, our officers are actually warned well in advance that they can't take that period of week off because it's what's classed as a red. So we are all in, and we all work a late turn on that. So we do work. We do work in conjunction with the other parts of the borough, but we are dedicated to Feltham. So we do try and get out there. Again, it's just a case of ringing it in, and where we can, we would go down and deal with it. There are offences throwing fireworks it's getting hold of them. And I think people will have seen the footage last year with regards to the officers in other parts of London where they were being used as weapons. Us officers, neighbourhood, we can't deal with that. You know, you need the proper riot police to be down there with their long shields to protect themselves. And if we have to, then we would call them in. But we do have a policing response to that period of the year, which is quite robust.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So we've got a question from Councillor Hanif, and then a final one from Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Many of my questions have already been covered. Thank you very much. I just had one, and you don't have to answer it today. The enforcement of the COVID restrictions, what's the relationship between your policing team and London Borough of Hounslow policing team? And also, do you feel that you're protected enough going into vulnerable homes as well? Thank you. That was it.
I'll answer the first one. Are you talking about the civil enforcement officers for Hounslow, or are you talking about the Metropolitan Police officers that work for the council? Okay, no.
You're on mute, Councillor Hanif.
That's all right. Yeah, I think I managed to get that. So we do work closely with them. They obviously look at their Pan Borough, so they look across the whole of the borough. We do work closely with them. And in terms of enforcement, my officers, they are out there dealing with it and enforcing as much as possible. As I said, I don't actually have the figures of how many we've been given out, my officers, because they've not all been in, so I've not been able to ask them. One of the things that's come home quite hard this evening is that information from Public Health England. So it will be certainly something I will be continuing to enforce over the next few months as we go forward. One of the areas, or one of the challenges we do have around enforcement is youngsters. My understanding, and reading through all of the legislation that's gone on, is that there are that unless they're over the age of 18, we can't deal with them. So you can have a group of 16, 17-year-olds out on the street, and actually you can't issue them any penalty notices. You can take them home, but that's about it that you can do. But you can penalise people that are there when you are, if they are over 18. And they actually have responsibility for them. So there are a few challenges legally when it comes to dealing with groups. I was out last week dealing with a few people who were out exercising, but it wasn't the right type of exercise, and I won't go into the reasons or whys, but the circumstances actually meant that they were there thinking that they could do it properly, and I have no doubt after speaking to them and the evidence that they provided me that they didn't realise the error of their ways. It was all to do with flying drones, and their whole setup was perfectly legal. They see it as their form of exercise, which standing on a spot, I'm not too sure counts. But that was a scenario that we have. But we do have the challenges around the groups of youngsters where we do try and enforce as much as possible. In terms of feeling safe, I have my own personal views. I'm not going to air them while we're here because it's wrong for me to do so. Internally, the organisation has given us all the protective equipment that we need. We've got our general face masks, which we wear in the office every day. I make sure my team have them. I make sure all my team wipe the boards down, everything down daily with our wipes. There we go. In terms of officers that are going into people's houses, each of them has hand gel that they've been given, and before the pandemic we did this anyway. We had hand gels. We had hand gels that we would go into places and wash our hands after we come out because of the nature of the work that we deal with. I've seen some of the equipment that officers in the response teams, when they're going to these when they're going into incidences where they have to deal, they don't have a decision not to go in, and they do have the protection. They've got the FP2 masks, I believe it is, the bigger ones. They've got all of the kit that they need in order to, like the forensic suits that you would see. They are protected. There have been incidences where officers have had to self-isolate because they've had to come in, or they've come into contact with people that are either confirmed. And unfortunately, that is the nature of this business. We are the ones that will continue to run towards and not back down. So we do actually have to go and deal with it. But everybody has a good level of protection, and the amount of signs that I've got in the office telling me to abide by the COVID rules is I can't ignore them.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So finally, Councillor Mitchell, and we'll move on to the following agenda item after that.
Mohammed, I have had my hand up all the way through this to try and get in.
So Richard, that's not the protocol that's been, I mean, you were in the rehearsal yesterday.
I'm trying to, there isn't the normal, there's not the normal hand up that we usually put up on my screen.
So Richard, going forward, the protocol is, I mean, you put in you stick a D in the box, and then I will allow you to speak once you've got a D in the box.
Which box are you talking about?
So the chat box on the right. We ran through this in the rehearsal. I mean, so the chat box on your screen, you should be able to see. If you stick a D in there, I will know that you've got a question and you need to speak.
I do have something quite important to advise.
Okay, I will take that after Alan. But then going forward, if you have a question, could you please stick a D in the box? And if you have any issues, for future reference, get in contact with the IT team. They'll assist you through the whole protocol.
I got it.
Alan, please.
Yeah, hello, Dave. Yeah, I don't know whether you're aware, but A2 Dominion are the housing association that run most of Feltham Town Centre. They've recently introduced a Great Places to Live scheme, which comes with money to make it better for the residents here. We've had a gang going around the town centre blocks, causing mayhem, I have to say. It happened here as well where I live. Can you tell me how you liaise with A2 Dominion on issues like this in Feltham Town Centre, please, and whether you do at all? Thank you.
Well, Councillor, thank you for bringing that. I'm not aware of that. It hasn't been brought to my attention at all. I do have access to the mailbox for the ward, and I do actually have a look at it to see if anything comes in. I do work with, or we do some work with A2 Dominion, because we're part of one of the closure orders on the Felton West ward was actually with their help. I'm a little bit stumped because it's not something that's come to my notice, so I can't give you an answer. However, if you let me know the block that you're on about, I will increase patrols straight away.
Well, it was more than one block, but Beginia House was one of them. But
right,
I'm happy to take that later.
No, Beginia House, we're aware of. Sorry, with that particular one, we have been aware of, and we have increased patrols around there. But a lot of it comes in generally via phone call and airspace. Airspace, sorry, for those that don't know, is an internal system that monitors antisocial behaviour. So we do have that. And Virginia House has come to my knowledge, but that's the only one. And we have been trying to patrol it. I think there's an issue with access because we don't have the key to access it. I could be wrong on that. It could be another one, but generally our information that we get from that comes through 101 opposed to the to the housing.
Yeah. We'll tie that up. We'll tie that up after this meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, gents. Richard, finally.
Yeah, Chair. Yeah, Sergeant Vokes. It goes back to your situation about vehicle thefts. One of the situations we had in Hamworth, and I was personally involved, was the theft of catalytic converters. I had mine stolen from my car outside my house. My next door neighbour witnessed it going on and challenged the two characters that were dealing with it, and one of them, who was carrying an iron bar which they were using to jack up cars to get in underneath to get to the catalytic converter, he swung the bar at him and told him to F off, and then they just ambled down the street and off down the road. Now, we called the police to come in, and obviously they came, but by then they disappeared. But the issue I really wanted to bring to your attention is it was very evident that these characters that were doing this come from the neighbouring borough. They come from Hampton.
What evidence is there to say that that's the case?
Well, this is where they were seen to be going, and then there were several other incidences around as well that came from that area. It's very much on the borders of Hamworth and Hampton, and they were disappearing up Hamworth Road in Hamworth towards the schools up there. But those are the situations, and I had my catalytic converter, had to have it put on, but apparently they were concentrating on Hondas as one of the vehicles that they specialise in, I've had mine now, a chain put round it, and then the chain welded to the frame to stop them being able to go in and do it. So from a point of view, if people do have vehicles, especially the Japanese ones with the catalytic converters, they can have them secured by this sort of use, which means that they can't just, lift it up, roll underneath, cut it in with cutters, and then remove it, because the whole thing is welded to the chassis. So if anybody wants details of that, I'm quite happy to let them have them.
I take it it was called through at the time, was it?
Oh yes, yeah. We had the police officers down there within quite a short period of time, by which time they disappeared, and they did do a search around, but they had disappeared.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a situation where incidents like that is very difficult to police. There is ultimately an issue where actually the manufacturers of the cars should take responsibility. They've known for years about how valuable the platinum is inside those catalytic converters, but they don't seem to put any protection devices on them. Not saying that actually the police don't have a part to play in that, but it makes our job even difficult when actually, and I've seen footage where they're in under the car and out within 30 seconds.
Oh yeah.
So I know how quickly that they work and how often they work. It is just the difficulty of being able to be able to police that. One of the other things that we've had, and it's around vehicles, is a few years back Land Rover had a design fault where it could be easily opened. After a bit of pressure, I believe they tightened that up. So in essence, yes, we can increase our patrols, but there also does have to be a bit of pushback onto the manufacturers, which can only really be done at the top of the chain in order to try and get them to put their cages on. I believe that a few vehicles have actually had that done now. But in terms of Hamworth, the vehicle offences overall, there has been a 41% reduction in Hamworth over the last year, which is 41 fewer of offences, and out of all the 20 or 21 wards on the borough, is actually Hamworth's actually had the fewest number of offences, but that doesn't stop obviously the issue being there, and we will do our best as we can, but it's very difficult without the evidence in order to prosecute. Just because and just give you an example, you get the registration number of a car of people driving off, the drivers aren't necessarily the people that committed it, and that is the difficulty that we have with law. We have to have a absolute guarantee that we're going to get a conviction at court, and if that comes down to evidential issues around identification of suspects, then unfortunately the case may not go ahead. So it does become really, really difficult in order to suggest that somebody has done something. Even if we found fingerprints on the outside of a car, that is inadmissible in court, because anybody could touch that. Not inadmissible, but you can't use it, because the classic defence is, oh yeah, I walked along and I touched the roof of the car. There you go. Even though there are other issues, but there is, as time has gone on, evidential routes have been cut off through challenges in court. So there is a difficulty with it, but it's not something that we won't look at, and if I need to, I'll put an operation in place.
The reason I was saying part of this actually, Dave, was these characters were so brazen, they didn't have a vehicle. They just walked off down the road, having waved as an iron bar at my neighbour. They just walked off down the road.
Right. Okay. I obviously can't comment on individual cases, but yeah, I'll have a look at it.
I appreciate. I'm just saying it's one of the problems being very close to that Hamworth Hampton border.
Absolutely, but at Felton we're unique. We've got Hampton one side, we've got the airport another, and we've got Surrey as well. So, you know, we are in a real. When Surrey run a police operation, it's.
Sorry, Dave. Could I just cut you off? Could I get somebody to move suspension of standing orders?
Yeah, I'll move, Chair, as I'm on my mark.
Thank you. Proceed, Dave.
And that's really it. Is that we're in.
Sorry, Chair, you need to get that seconded.
Yes, please.
Could I have that
seconded by Alan Mitchell?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, and it's it is a bit of a challenge where we are because generally in policing we do like to try and solve things. Ideally, we'd like to prevent them happening in the first place, and when things do happen, we displace them. It is a bit of a vicious circle sometimes, but we do try our best.
Just as a final thing, just a bit humorous, I actually found a team of police officers with their civilian officer walking down my street and stopped them to welcome them to my part of Hamworth, only to find that they were from Hampton and were lost.
Well, we've been doing a lot, as you well know. Yeah, they probably are. I mean, I got lost over on the Woodlawn Estate the other day, which is again across across a totally different policing district. Absolutely. And a totally different ward. So, yes, it does happen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dave. I mean, thank you for answering all the questions. I believe that's all we have for yourself. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for all the hard work you're doing during this so critical time. I mean, we definitely need officers out there, and I mean, I know you've got a team that are working on it as and when needed. So thank you very much once again, Dave. Yeah, I mean, if you don't need to stay, then yeah, I mean.
Thank you, Chair. No, I will stay because it's my first forum, so it'd be interesting to do, and I will certainly pass on to the troops who do all the work, yours and the panels. Thanks.
Yeah, please do give our regards, and yeah, more than happy for you to stay and enjoy the rest of the forum with us. So I'll just move on to the next agenda item. So agenda item 5. So we've got agenda item 5, Felton Bridge and Town Centre works. So just moving on to this particular agenda item, I believe we've got Andrew Burton with us, so who's the Interim Assistant Director of Transport and Parking. Andrew, could you please introduce yourself?
Chair, I think you had agreed that Councillor Khan would do a brief introduction. Is that correct, Councillor Khan?
Absolutely, sorry, my apologies, Councillor Hanif. Could you please
Chair, that's fine. I mean, in the event of having a very exhausted item number 3 and number 4, I'll be really brief. So many of the members of the forum would know Mark Frost. So basically the work that Mark Frost did within London Borough of Hounslow, Andrew Burton has taken over with all of that work, and as last meeting's request, we wanted to get an update on Feltham update. So Andrew's here. So this is a welcome to him, and also he comes with a great reputation as well. Thank you very much. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Khan, and thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your generous introduction. The local area forum will know Mark Frost as a very capable and trusted member of the council staff, but his reputation spread far beyond the borough boundaries, and is well regarded professionally across London as someone who translates vision into reality. So those major improvements that we recently completed at Feltham is one example. So those have been on the community's wish list for years. So it was quite a coup for the council to seek out and secure the funding to pay for them. Now, the manner of the way we got that funding was that we had to deliver in 3 phases. Phases 1 and 2 were completed in December, and phase 3 has yet to be programmed. Phase 1 was the widening of the bridge over the river, the widening of the bridge over the railway and the junction, the improvements each side. All those works were completed in December. There's a few things left over just to be completed. Tree planting, you may have noticed, there's some lamp columns that we haven't yet connected as well, and there's a few adjustments for traffic signs and road markings. Those should be done in the next 6 to 7 weeks. And there's a piece of work, Network Rail, where the temporary bridge was. You'll notice there's some work needs reinstating beneath there. They tell us that'll be finished by the end of next month, when they will be vacating entirely. Phase 2 was further down in the town centre. It was improving the High Street, Victoria Road, Mono Lane, Bedfont Lane, and their works were completed at the beginning of December. There's 2 pieces of work left to complete. One is to tie into the works at on the southern side of the railway by the platform. So we're tying that into Network Rail. That's on site at the moment. They should be finished in about 4 weeks. And we've got another piece of work raising the junction of Manor Place and Bedfont Lane. We can't do that yet because there's building works nearby, but that should be done during April. Further on, so those works aren't totally complete because we've had some feedback. 3 things in particular. One is disabled parking on Bedfont Lane. We'll be consulting on that in the summer. When traffic levels stabilise, we will be doing some traffic speed surveys. We're aware of some concerns in the community about drivers travelling too fast. So we'll be surveying that to see if we can action that. And there's also some concerns about the width of you can cross the road on Bedfont Lane at the junction of the High Street. The road's quite wide, so we can have a look whether we can improve on that. There's been a lot of requests coming in about other things that the community would like us to change on the scheme. I'll happily discuss those on a one-to-one basis. What we will be doing is uploading all of those comments onto the website, just so people like a frequently asked questions round. Phase 3, you may remember, is building an additional pedestrian bridge alongside Hounslow Road, and there's another a piece of work about that's being in design at the moment. We can't yet share exactly what that design is because we're in consultation with Network Rail, but that work will report back to you as soon as we have more information. So I think Mark shared at the last meeting that we appreciate that that as part of the project lockdown or close down process, we carry out a lessons learned review to help us to do better next time. And when we have things like a Facebook group called Surviving Feltham Roadworks around, it's a good indication that we could have done better. So to help us flesh out what that may be, we will shortly be sending a survey to everyone who has asked to be kept informed of the project, and then from that we'll form a focus group and a public engagement event similar to what we held early this month for the street space schemes. I'll be letting you know when that is in next couple of weeks. There will also be an internal review between Hounslow Council, Network Rail, South West Trains, Transport for London, all the authorities who were involved in creating that scheme. So internal review to work out what worked well and less well in the scheme's development and delivery. So we'll be looking at things like the time it took to build, the changes we made to the design between launching the scheme and completing it, and the degree to which the scheme delivered against what we set out to do. So that's where we are at the moment. So that we're not quite there yet, but it's been an amazingly effective piece of construction works, and happily all that disruption is now over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was very comprehensive detail once again. So are there any questions for so I think we've got Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah. Oh. What was that? Come on. Yeah, briefly. Thank you, Andrew, for that. When I met with Niall Bolger, it must have been a year ago, on behalf of the residents, they certainly wanted a review into what had happened, so that in terms of the delays, so that in future this wasn't going to happen again. But thank you for those reassurances, especially the bit by the Sue Ryder home or the Sue Ryder shop in Felton. And the fact that we're now pushing on towards the end of the third phase. Can I wish you luck? I wanted to do that, but also propose, Chair, through you, a vote of thanks for our great predecessor, or your great predecessor, Andrew, Mark Frost, for the work and his dedication to our area. Thank you, Chair. I propose that.
Absolutely, thank you, Alan. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I would second that as well.
Great, thank you. If there are no other,
it's my support, Chair.
Great, thank you. Again, yeah, thank you, Andrea, and of course, many thanks to Mark Frost, who's absolutely did a great job bringing this to the stage it is. It may be later than what was initially expected, but I mean, we are at a good point at the moment, and hopefully we have learned. There are many lessons learned, and as long as we can learn from them and this will improve many more works that are to come in this ward or many other wards. And yeah, thanks again on behalf of myself and the rest of the members of the forum. So Andrew, I believe there may be some more questions for yourself further in the open forum, which have been pre-submitted, so you may have to stick on with us. Thank you. So just moving on to the following item. So we've got agenda item 6. So we now move on to the Hamworth Park House progress update with Andrew Smith, Assistant Director of Housing. Andrew, please, if you may.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Andrew Smith. I'm the Assistant Director for Housing Development and Supply within the Council, and I'm responsible for the Council's house building programme. And if we can go to the slides, I think obviously most people in the room here tonight will be very familiar with Hamworth Park House, but it's always fascinating to remind ourselves of the rich history.
Just a second, Andrew. Okay, now that's great. We've got the slides on now.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, the slides are live. Initially, with the camera was on yourself only. Great, please proceed.
Okay. Yes, I know most people in this room are very familiar with the house and its grounds and its rich history. But I'm, as an outsider, I'm particularly interested in that history. So I've just thrown a few photos there to remind people of that history and why it's so important that we do actually work together with the owner of the land to restore Hamworth Park House. Next slide, please. So Hamworth Park House is a Grade 2 listed mansion. It's in very poor condition and is at risk of collapse. It's been left empty for over 25 years. It is privately owned, and the current owner is a firm called AGC Limited, who've been working with the council to work out viable plans for the restoration of the house, the gardens to the house, and the surrounding woodland. Next slide, please. So just to give you a nice aerial view of the house and the woodland and the surrounding grounds, gives you an idea of how overgrown the house and gardens are and where it fits within the wider park. And a lot of our proposals will be to build new properties within the boundary of this area of land, and also to open up the park to get to the river. Next slide, please. So our main priority is to secure the restoration and refurbishment of Hamworth Park House. And the idea is to turn the house into a wider community hub, which will include many usages and activities, from a heritage museum, cafe, meeting function rooms, local arts and crafts, and other types of uses. It will be approximately about 2,000 square meters of community space when it is refurbished. To assist in the development of the house and the refurbishment, there's proposal to build 5 blocks of residential homes. 3 of them, building A, B and C on the plan, which are marked AGC, is the land that's owned by the developer. This area of land and the house itself is not owned by the council. The developer AGC will develop these homes, and the income from these homes will refurbish the house. The council, who own the land to the left of the house and where the image here shows Longford River, proposed to build 2 blocks of affordable housing that would be council housing, and that will assist in opening up the woodland and refurbishing the existing woodland to connect it into the wider park. The idea is to introduce a new boulevard road through the site to give better access through to the house and onto the park itself. All in all, the council will be refurbishing and making more accessible about 7 hectares of derelict green belt. Next image, please. So there's a few views of what we're thinking of going forward. You can see the house in the context again, and surrounding it is the blocks that are in the light white image here. If we go to the next slide as well, there's some more images that may be a bit clearer for people. So we have 2 aerial views of the house from different angles, giving an impression of where these blocks are going to be and the road that will open through to the main park. The 2 images at the bottom give an idea of that boulevard that leads down to the park. The left one is the one from the rear of the house, and the one on the right shows the image of the front of the house. And just to remind everybody, the house at the moment is enclosed and separate from the park itself. So I'd say one of the main aims we have is to open it up to the wider community. Next slide, please. And this is a straight-on view that would be from the existing main park towards the house across the old lawn area. Next slide, please. So what's the next steps? Today we're sort of outlining the vision for the house and the grounds, which will lead into a wider community engagement with the public and key stakeholders such as the Friends of Hamworth Park House. That will take place from the middle of February. We're aiming for the 15th of February for a month, and we're encouraging everyone to contribute towards these proposals. Ideas for the woodland, ideas for the use of the house. The more observations and comments and support we have, the more likely it is that we will achieve our aims. Once we've completed that community engagement, we'll consider all the responses that we've had, and that will lead into a planning application in the spring time. Once the planning has been achieved, we will, the developer, AGC, are planning to commence the refurbishment of Hamworth Park House next spring, summer of 2022. So these slides will be placed on our consultation website, which is on the screen there. And like I say, when it come to the middle of February, we will have some more detailed drawings and storyboards of the proposals that will be available for people to comment on, all of which will be accessed from the website that's on the screen there. Thank you.
That's great, Andrew. Right, so we've got a question from, I believe, sorry, just a second, I'm having trouble with my screen here. So we've got a Alan, that was, you've had a D, was that previously or was that from this presentation? Alan?
No,
it wasn't, Chair, but I just wonder whether Andy could just confirm what we think the lifespan of the house is, you know, moving forward, you know, if we weren't to get that, if the things weren't to happen by 2022. You know, how much are we against the clock, Andrew?
Well, we've been against the clock for a couple of years now, but the building is still deteriorating, and without a solution and achieving planning for our proposals, there is a real risk that the house will fall down. And how long that is, I'm not a structural engineer, to be honest. It could be 6 months, it could be 6 years. It's very difficult to judge these things, but certainly we are keen to press on and engage with the community now. I'll try to obtain planning permission and then we'll work to refurbish the house.
Excellent, because I think you'll have the support of this forum and the whole community on it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Hanif.
Thank you very much, Chair. Andrew, I've got a few questions and some concerns as well. First of all, yes, great. I'm really pleased where we are. It's been a long time coming. You know, everyone here in this area forum for many years knows the battles we've been through. So I have a question. When you talked about the engagement sessions in your last slide, I remember going through this process that the Friends of Hanworth Park House were always promised a meeting prior to the public consultation because they had been so close to it. So I just want to reiterate that and make sure that the community around the Friends of Hanworth Park House get that pre-meet, because they're the ones that have been quite empowering for us to be where we are today. And I would also suggest that ward councillors be invited to that meeting as well. So that's number one, if you can just make sure that happens. And number two, where you talked about the wider improvements in the area, opening it up into the park and all the landscaping, I'm really keen that we understand properly what that actually means. Yeah. What I do not want to happen and see is that we only do landscaping about 20 meters or something near to the buildings that are erected. We need to have a proper landscape that really opens up the accessibility from the park, etc. And that will be really key for us if we are truly going to make it a community asset. It cannot be only in the immediate area for that. So that's really key. And the reason why I say that, and this is my last point, and I'll end on that, is that with all the two developments of the two blocks and the housing, there will be a lot of kind of damage to the natural landscape. So that has to be recompensated as well. So that's really key. So that's where I'm coming from. So, and I know I'm not just speaking for myself, I'm speaking for my ward councillors and also the Friends of Hanworth Park House. So they were the things I just wanted to get across, and I'm glad where we are at the moment. And thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, we've been talking to the Friends for many months now, and we do plan to have a meeting with them in advance, so they're fully briefed on the detail of proposals. And obviously we will include the councillors as we normally do in our pre-engagement sessions. Yes, as I said, the idea is not just to do like an environmental improvement around the buildings that we build. It is to open up the whole of the 7 hectares that still remain within the council's ownership. And that will allow a lot of the loss of the landscape to be compensated by opening it up. And we're hoping that a lot of the activities around the environment, around schools and nature, can be run from the house as well, so that the community is engaging within the house. So that's certainly very much the core of the plans from the council side. So I think I can reassure councillors that that is really as much important to us as it is the residential development.
Thank you, Andrew. So Andrew, I do have another. I've got a couple of more questions for you, and these have come in via the live event Q&A. So I believe maybe from the members of the public. So I'll just read the first one out to you. So from Richard Griffiths, Chairman, Friends of Hanworth Park House. To build in public greenbelt land, it must meet the special circumstances. So Jules Pipe, Deputy Mayor, Planning and Regeneration, said at a meeting that the GLA have advised that full landscaping and park improvements must be included for the development and not done years later, as it won't be supported. What progress has been made by London Borough of Hounslow to action the landscape and environment master plan to support this planning application? Can you elaborate on the improvements, especially the budgets during the challenges we live in now?
Yes, like I said, the landscaping is as important to us as the residential development, and we are keen during this consultation to hear all the ideas that there may be from the community as to the uses that we could put this land to, how we can interact with the community, how we can bring it in. And until we kind of have that idea, it's very difficult to have an idea that, you know, exactly what's going to go on in the planning application. But it is definitely at the forefront of our plans. The very special circumstances that Richard referred to is a planning term that applies to loss within the green belt, and certainly from the GLA's point of view and the loss of that green belt is a combination of the restoration of the house, the community activities there, the affordable housing, the wider improvements to the park. So all of it is a complete package, and all of it is a package that we have to deliver as part of the planning application. So again, you know, it's part of the core plans that we have, and will not be some plan for further down the road.
Okay, Andrew, there's another follow-up one from another member. So why is the council proposing to build so many blocks of housing? Why these locations? Some of these council blocks appear to be over an existing path. Has the council considered building the blocks by the river / less prominent locations?
I don't believe the buildings are going over existing paths. I think so far they're designed to go around them and work with them. The location has been chosen partly because it will form a community in itself rather than spreading it around. The quantum is required to generate sufficient income to be able to refurbish the house. So the quantity is the minimum that we believe that we need to be able to make the restoration viable.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. If there are no other questions directly for Andrew, okay, so we got one from Hanif. We'll take that and move to the following agenda item just after that.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, and Andrew, that's all really good, and I just have a bit of a follow-up question in relation to the two other questions that come in. Is that when we talk about the affordable housing, in terms of the money that will be raised, I just want to make sure that we've got the sufficient budgets to be able to do and cover the special circumstances. So just make a note of that, because that's really important as well. And I appreciate why we have the social housing, but it's also important that we have the budget, or later let us know that we have the money, etc., because that will definitely come out in the consultation. That is going to be really key. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you, gents. So I'll move on to the following question, or I believe we're moving on to the following item on the agenda. So we've got we've just moved on from the Hamworth Park House update. Thank you, Andrew, once again. So now we move on to the open forum, and I think we've got a couple of more items and we should be done. So
Chair, sorry to interrupt. We have two questions that were submitted in advance, three in fact, but one we dealt with earlier, which was the Felton Assembly Hall. Dana Lee has kindly come along and she's going to address the two other questions with your agreement, Chair.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so we are moving into the open forum, and I believe these are already posted in the live Q&A. So let's run through them in the order they were published. So the first question, okay, so we've had the Hamworth House one, that's just been answered from Richard Griffiths. So we've got okay, so there was, okay, so Joanne, you posted another one on the landscaping as important as residential development.
Yeah, that was a response, Chair, to the original question. I think the two originating questions that came in advance, Dana Lee will actually read out the question and the response, if that's okay, and I will populate them up in the...
Okay, yeah, okay, while you do that, I mean, I know there's a few others that you've already populated. There was one from Liz Mammoth, and that was directed, I believe, matters arising regarding, I'll take that now, in fact, regarding appendix question 5, where is the report which Councillor Khan was going to present this meeting on the proposal of low traffic neighbourhoods in this area? Please, Councillor Hanif.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for sending that question in, Liz, and I appreciate that. And yes, it was in the minutes, and based on what we requested last time, that hence why Andrew joined us today to give an update on the works that you've done, and also in relation to the low traffic neighbourhoods, and a lot of that, especially in the west area of the borough, it hasn't started yet. That won't happen until once we complete the engagement sessions, which we're doing already with those that have already been implemented. So phase 3, where it will take place in the west of the borough, hasn't started yet. So there is no update. So that's the reason why there's no actual physical report. But if you want anything a little bit more specific, I'm happy if you write to me, as I appreciate you understand the systems as being a former councillor. So if you write to me, I will get a response directly back to you. But in terms of the low traffic neighbourhoods, this will all come into phase 3, and that work has not started yet. Hopefully that answers that question on the LTNs. Was there anything else additional? Just make sure I haven't missed anything.
That's all there was, Councillor Hanif. I mean, if there is, I believe, Liz, after the forum, you can get in touch with Liz or anyone else that may require additional details. Okay, so just moving, I believe there was another one that was from Paul Lerner. What was the original budgets for the Felton roadworks, and how much have they cost so far, and where did the extra money come from? As I understand it, the cycle pedestrian path at the top of the bridge can't be done due to the lack of funds. How much will that be, and what plans are they to ensure this work is completed? Finally, I note that the old station front looks a bit of a mess. Are there plans for this, even and as small as repainting the peeling plinth?
Okay, so the figures, Andrew's with me, so he can probably rattle them off, but we may need to just get them clarified, because that was back in 2016 when the work started, and at that time when the budget was set, because of some of the changes to the programme works and utility works, and also through the engagement, some of that process has changed. So there was an increase in the budgets at that time. But in terms of where the money comes from, obviously it would have come from the external people and GLA, and some from our funding as well. But if you want the exact figures, I don't know if Andrew may have them to hand, and how much of the increase was. Otherwise, I'm happy to write specifically with the exact figures as to what it was in 2016 and to what it ended up being now in 2021, with a few more works to be done, which Andrew explained earlier. So happy to do that. And obviously there would have been a difference from the original set budget to what it was now, and then how we compensated for that difference, and where the funding come in. And I understand the question, but I don't want to give you exact figures just in case I'm wrong. And obviously Andrew has just come in later, and our officer Chris Deacon, who's been very close to it, would know that. But I've just seen the question now, so I don't know if Andrew wants to add to anything I've said. But if they're happy to get a written response from me, I'm happy to do that, Chair. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is a question of, on day one, the budget was £15.6 million. That's been stated in public, but in the 4 years that have happened since then, the scheme has changed in its shape and scope. So rather than say how we've delivered against 15.6 million, we will give a more explanatory response about what we added to the scope and what extra money we brought into that to deliver that. So it's not as overspent as the bottom line looks with the outturn, but we'll go into a more detailed presentation for that.
So there was another question on the lack of funds for the footbridge, and I think there was another one on the old station, whether there was any repainting, any works going to be carried out on those.
Through the community engagement, there was a lot of work with the mosaics that we were going to put up, and also with the footbridge. I imagine once that footbridge comes in over the bridge, then yeah, that's all going to come in later in the phase, the next round of funding and phases. But in terms of if we have the funding of that or not, I would assume we would have, but I'm happier then, as Andrew has said, to give a written response to that. Obviously, it's in the master plan. It needs to happen. So, you know, funds, if they're not already being allocated, I'm sure they will be. So that's my answer to that. Unless Andrew wants to add anything himself.
No, Chairman, that's exactly it. So we're at quite an early stage of design. The bridge design it depends on it's a design and build option. So we have to talk to suppliers and get background and work out exactly how to build it, and then we'll be much closer to the budget required. But we're not there yet.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andrew and Hanif. So we've got one on the Feltham community, I believe. This is for Andrew Smith. So many members of the Feltham community feel that Feltham area is taking more than its fair share of new houses, flats, buildings, and etc. compared to the rest of the borough, putting pressure on parking, GP, and other services, apart from concerns about specific projects such as proposed 14-storey new build near the Showman site. Is this perception correct, and will there be adequate provision for GPs, dentists, etc. in line with the increased population? Andrew, you with us? Andrew, you're on mute. So I believe Andrew Smith is with us, Joe, because I can see him online.
Yeah, Chair, I don't know what's happened. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have to come back on that one. So I'll take the follow-up questions, and then we'll just have to come back once. He may be having technical issues. Okay. So that HMO one's been answered.
Chair, with your agreement, can we ask Dana Lee to step in while Andrew comes back to us and deal with the two questions that are sitting? The one around Hounslow Council appears to have submitted the local plan update for the Feltham area west. However, those two questions that are linked in purple on the right, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it'll be a good time for her to come in now.
Dana Lee, the chair has agreed.
Great. Hi, thank you, Chair. Hi, everyone. So my name is Stanley Edmond. I'm the Head of Spatial Planning for Hounslow Council. I believe the question that was posed, I'll just read it out, is, can everyone hear me? Sorry.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah. Perfect, great. So the question is, Hounslow Council appears to have submitted a local plan update for Feltham area to the West Area Plan. However, the revisions and the update based on the most recent consultation have not been brought back to Area Forum. Did the councillors sign off these updates? What plans are there to update residents on how the council responded to the feedback? So the answer to that, so thank you everyone for your feedback. Of course, you know, the plan has been, you know, a long time in the making. We've started it since 2017 and we had loads of consultation. We had loads of workshops, drop-in sessions and everything. The last consultation that we've done is what you call Regulations 19 consultation to the local plan. So basically there's a set of regulations that goes with that Regulation 19 consultation. And the short of it is that that consultation was just to tell the community, this is the plan that we plan to submit to the Secretary of State. Any comments, any feedback on the plan will be directed straight to the Secretary of State to help the Secretary of State make a decision as to whether they find the plan sound and whether they want to approve the plan. So basically the responses from the community around that time was all sent. So we submitted a plan on the 20th of December, I think, and all the responses from the community, we've even included a consultation statement which sets out, which gives a summary to the inspector as to what the community said, how we responded to it and everything. So all that was sent to the inspector, and all that will help in his decision when he comes to look at the plans. Now, before we submitted the plans, this went to full council. It went to full council on the 10th of November. It was approved to be submitted, and hopefully after we submitted the plan, we will hear back from the inspector, who would let us know who's going to examine the plan. So it'll be an examination in public, and the community and people who made representation to the plan could be invited to speak. So that's the next opportunity, really. So as soon as we get an examiner, an examination date, we'll send emails out to let everyone know that we've got an examination date. If you want to hear more, come and participate and stuff like that. If you want your views to be heard by the examiner, come and participate. So that's the next stage. We don't really know when that is. So, as soon as we know, we'll let you know. So that's the first question. The second one talks about, I'll read it out. Many residents will have seen the proposals for a 14-story building on the previously open land next to Feltham Station, now called the New Road Triangle. Much of the information provided on the website is incorrect and misleading. The council committed to remove the neighbourhood site from the Felton master plan, but no update was ever undertaken. The temporary Lidl car park land, which was previously allotment, was promised to be returned to grassland as part of the planning application. It's also not suitable for tall buildings and will block views. Can this information be corrected and the concept proposals be brought to the area forum for more discussion and revision? Also, what is the evidence behind the suitability for a tall building on this site, and have wind tunnel effects been modelled? So I guess this question is sort of two parts. It's more a development management question. It is also a local plan question. So I'll answer the bit with regards to the site adjacent to the New Road Triangle, otherwise known as the Station Lane Estate. This has been removed from the West of the Borough plan. It hasn't been removed from the master plan because the master plan is just background evidence to our local plan. So it was not taken forward in the West of the Borough local plan. Therefore, that proposal that was made in the master plan is not taken forward. So when a planning application is made, the planning application would be made with regards to, it would have regard to any adopted plan around that time. So if the planning application comes in when the West of the Borough plan is approved, it will have regard for the West of the Borough local plan and not the master plan, if that makes sense. So it is removed from the West of the Borough plan, and you can go on our website and you can see that. With regards to the New Road Triangle, I went on the website and I saw that they've started consultation on development there. I think it's the developers who are consulting on that development scheme. But they haven't actually put in a planning application yet, so we can't really comment on at this stage until they put in a planning application. So I guess when they put in a planning application, I don't know whether planning application comes to the area forum. I don't think so, but you will be given a chance to express your views when the planning application comes in. Hopefully I've answered your questions.
Thank you very much, Denali. That was quite detailed. And Noah, just answering to your final question, concern that you raised, that they don't normally, the planning applications don't normally come in for discussion to the forum, but yeah, they normally go to planning committees to deal with. But yeah, thank you very much for the detailed response and feedback and clarifying the changes and whether they've been updated on the borough, the master plan, as opposed to the other the borough planning update. Okay, thanks, Denali. So we've got, I believe there's another one. Is Andrew back with us? Andrew, are you with us? Andrew Smith. Okay, I don't think he's back with us, but once he's back with us, we can revert. Okay, so
I think, Chair, in fairness, I will try and contact Andrew directly, but you've covered most of the questions that were in the chat. I'm just checking to see with your agreement if there's any. The only comment that you have is the council is the developer for the new road triangle. That was a comment that's been made. I don't know of any officers here who can come back on that one. No.
Sorry, development in a new road triangle?
Yeah, they say, yeah, somebody says the council is the developer for the new road triangle, Chair, in the chat.
Oh, I don't know enough details on it. If we are the developer, it would be sorry, a development arm or someone, you know. I can come back to you guys on that, sorry. But what I know is it's not got to planning application stage, so I'll come back to you.
Yeah, okay. What we can do is, Joe. I mean, if the member of public does require more information on this particular area and they have an interest to get some more details, I would definitely encourage them to send an email to yourself, Joe. If you can drop your email in there, or if any other members of the public watching have any other questions or concerns, they can drop this to yourself, and we can you can get back to them within the next few days or so, or otherwise we can, if it's something larger, then we can come back to it in the following area forum. But I'm sure you'll be able to deal with it in the next over the next few days or a week or so. So yeah, if you'd want to drop your details,
more than happy to do so, Chair. It will come under Wendy's remit, to be fair to Wendy. But just to say that, Chair, we gave an assurance that any questions that were put into the chat, if they don't get an answer tonight, we will make sure that they get an answer in the next forthcoming days. And I hope that's okay with you and the elected members. No question will go left unanswered.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so I mean, so that's as far as the area for open forum.
We're on to the Crane, Cheng. We're now on to item 8, Chair, the Crane Valley project.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you so much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. So now that we're moving on from the open forum, just gonna scroll down. So the second last item, I believe. So this is the Crane Valley project. So just moving on to that. So we've got Rob Gray, the chair of the force. Rob, are you with us? Could you introduce yourself and provide details on this particular item?
Hello. Yes. Hello. Yeah, my name is Rob Gray. I'm chair of Force, and I did send through a short report on this item to everyone, which is on the agenda. And I have got some slides. Now, I'm not actually live with you at the moment. The live feed is a minute behind the audio feed. So can you tell me when the slides are up, and then I can tell you when to move on?
So Rob, the slides are up, but they're not live. Could I ask the IT team to shift screens? Thank you. Now you're live, Rob. Please proceed.
Okay. So if we've got slide 1, which is just the introductory slide. So if we could move to slide 2, please. So here we're looking, hopefully, at a map of the Crane Valley in Hounslow. It's a lovely 5-kilometre corridor of lots of interlinked spaces. It runs from Crane Park in the south up to Avenue Park in the north. We've also got the Upper Dukes River, which links into the Crane and which actually links the Crane to the Cllr River some kilometres to the west. And it's part of a much larger 30-kilometre corridor, 1,500 hectares of open space, which links the River Thames at Isleworth all the way up to Headstone Manor in Harrow. In Hounslow itself, these are amazing assets, they really are, but as anyone who's visited them will know that quite a lot of them aren't in far from optimal condition. So if we could just move to the next slide, please. So just a wee bit about us. We started in 2003, we're all volunteers, we've got around 700 members. They're mostly in Hounslow or Richmond, our members, and that's where we focus our energies, although we are part of the wider Crane Valley Partnership, which is 5 boroughs, Harrow, Hillingdon, Ealing, Hounslow and Richmond. So our first big project in Hounslow was from 2009, where we were part of a group which raised £500,000 from GLA and transformed Crane Park. In 2014, we did the second major project on the Lower Dukes River, which links Twickenham with Isleworth, 4-kilometre corridor. Again, working with Hounslow and Richmond and raising about 700,000 to transform that. Next slide, please. So looking at Donkeywood and Brazil Mill Woods, we were aware of these spaces for quite a few years, but we had our first volunteer day there in May 2018, and we really started to appreciate the value of these spaces. They are lovely. They've got great biodiversity, lots of wildlife there, got great heritage value, and they're an potentially important green travel route, but they've also got major problems. When we started in 2018, there was very little public use of these spaces, mostly a few single men, basically, very few women or children. Lots of antisocial behaviour, drug dealing still going on there, fly tipping still going on there, rough sleepers still going on there, and invasive plants such as knotweed and giant hogweed, which were really problematic there. Next slide, please. So at the beginning of 2020, we started a small project funded by the Hounslow Communities Fund, ourselves and several other charities working together with Lamson 360 and doing some community engagement work on these spaces. So we ran about a dozen volunteer days with TCV conservation volunteers doing practical improvement work, lots of family and community events, getting families and local people out into these spaces. And even through lockdown, we were able to continue this, even though it's been very difficult. And we've been engaging with schools and local business. And Lamson have been terrific, I have to say. I'm really very impressed with the Lamson contractors and the work that they've been doing alongside us. The pandemic factor has been difficult for the projects, but actually it's been amazing for the spaces. The number of visitors has increased by a factor of 10. We've been doing surveys throughout this period. And we know also that whereas before it was mostly men, it's now a lot more women and children visiting these spaces. So it's starting to have a major impact. We're getting over 1,000 downloads of the map of the area, or the 2 maps we've got of these areas, and over 100,000 engagements through social media. So we can see that the pandemic has unleashed a lot of public interest in these local spaces, which is very exciting. And we've now got a unique opportunity to do something. Next slide, please. So we put a bid in with Parks Department at the end of last year, and we found out this month that we've been successful at around about £500,000 of funding through Cllr 106. We're putting together a steering group for Donkeywood and Brazil Mill Woods, working with the council and other interested parties. And this money is for infrastructure work, basically, to improve access right through all these spaces, and put much better pathways through to improve the entrances and to actually improve some of the habitats and biodiversity. We also hope to link with a project team that are working north of the A30 all the way up to Cranford Park to start to do some improvements there. And it all links into a much larger programme of work being run through Crane Valley Partnership. We're developing a match funding to do some more community engagement through this process. And we're very hopeful that some projects that we're talking to with local businesses will bring some further match funding into the pot. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps? We need to set up the steering group. We need to engage all interested parties, and this area forum is a big part of that. And we need to scope out the work over several years. And we do see this as being transformational, this work, including following up these match funding opportunities with different parties. And deliver some initial improvement this year. That's the plan, to get some clear improvements on the ground this year. So I guess, how can the councillors and wider public not listening in help? First of all, let us have your views as to what we're proposing. Identify your own issues and opportunities for these spaces. Tell us what the problems are, tell us what the opportunities are, and help to raise the profile of the project, both within the council and outside in the wider world. Next slide, please. So that's really all I wanted to say. As I say, I'm Rob Gray, I'm Chair of Force. I've left some contact details for me and also for the different interested parties on there. So I'm now happy to take any questions that might come through.
Thank you very much, Robert. That was a very detailed presentation, and I mean, you're doing some absolutely great work there. Yeah, and I'll encourage you to continue. Absolutely. Do any of the members of the forum have any questions for Rob on his presentation? Councillor Hanif.
Thank you very much. Rob, I really do appreciate the work you're doing, because I cycle some bits of that. I haven't managed to cycle all of it. I've entered it from different aspects, from Boston Manor Park and also from near the Iron Bridge near Greenford, and I think I've passed some of the pictures that you had as well. So I definitely encourage everything that you're doing, and any support that we as the area forum can do will be great. So my question, outside of the amazing work to do with litter picks and creating some great natural resources, is some bits I wasn't what's the, in relation to cycling and signage as well. I mean, I think that's key, where we could, the bits that hit our borough, we can help with. What are the challenges around there? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, certainly signage is going to be a key part, because a lot of people don't even know it exists. If you want to find out more about the spaces, then you could start by looking at our website. There's some really good maps that people can download on there, which show how all these different spaces link together, and link together for cycling and for walking. But certainly at the moment, interestingly enough, the river is high, the place is very muddy, and you wouldn't get through there on a bicycle. So one of the things that is going to be a priority.
I can do it then.
Yeah, you can do it. You can definitely do it sort of outside of wet periods like this. It would dry out, but at the moment there's not an all weather sort of track through there. One of the things that we want to do is to get what's known as a breed and gravel track all the way through there, which is very similar to what you can see through Crane Park, the Hounslow side of Crane Park, which again transform that space, just putting in an all-weather surface that people can use all the time, and it has also gives people a much greater sense of safety and comfort in using those spaces. They can see that other people are using them, and what we call pro-social behaviour. Lots of local people enjoying these spaces actually deters antisocial behaviour. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hanif and Rob. I mean, just I think Councillor Mitchell has just touched on what you were saying there, Rob. That I mean, we need to get these. We need to promote these kind of places, the natural beauty. I mean, amongst our residents, and of course, like you mentioned, that I mean, a lot of people or residents are not even aware such places do exist in the vicinity. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah, please circulate anything that you can through your local groups and organisations, and please let me know if there's anything more that we can do to help that process. Thank you.
Yeah, Dave, sure. Please, do ask your question.
Thank you. I wasn't sure whether I could or not. A question that I have is a consultation with the police. Obviously, being relatively new to Feltham, I have seen the ongoing ASB and crime issues with the likes of Hamworth and Crane Park. I'm just wondering whether you'd be interested in possibly meeting up with our design out crime teams who could probably prevent the issues of ASB and antisocial behaviour and crime rather than the issue of us then having to come enforce it later. I'm not sure whether you've had that thought and consideration before.
It's a fairly major issue, to be perfectly honest, and all the things that we've been doing over the last 10 or 15 years. I would really welcome an opportunity to have a chat with you about it. You know, and to have you sort of linked in really through the steering group. We can send you the minutes of various of the meetings that we have, and then you can pitch in where you think that sort of we're going down the wrong track, or there were things that you can add to the process. Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. I just think that
drop me a line. Yeah, just drop me, if you don't mind, if you could drop me a line at that info@force email, and then we can link up outside the meeting.
I just think that let's try and prevent any issues before we have to come and solve them. But no, brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, gents. Richard, apparently you are waving your hand somewhere.
Yeah, I've tried your suggestion, but it's just not connecting. So the only options I've got is to raise my hand.
That's fine, but once we're finished with the meeting, could you please get in touch with the IT team to resolve any issues that you're having?
I'm on this 3 times a week, and this is the only one that I've got that problem with. So anyway, really, I just want to come in here on what was being said. I mean, I was born and bred in Hamworth, and I was raised with much of my early youth over what is Crane Park, the Hamworth side of it, and I know it then, and I know what it is now, and I have to commend the team's work there between the activities that used to happen when I was a youth and what can happen there now. It is much more family friendly. It's very tidy. Yeah, we've got a few problems. We know about the motorcycles. We had a meeting yesterday with our colleagues in Richmond along with it to discuss those problems, and we will get on top of them. But generally, there's an amazing amount of work. The wildlife that's in there, animals that I'd never even heard of before that exist in Crane Park in Hamworth, are absolutely amazing. So I commend anybody around. They don't have to live in Hamworth to go over there, but anybody to visit there. Once you get outside the Wellingtons area, and perhaps you can you know, walk in normal shoes over there, but it is an amazing place, an absolutely amazing space. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor. I really appreciate that advertisement for the Crane Valley.
Thank you. Councillor Bishnu, I believe you got a question. Sorry, Bishnu, Councillor Bishnu, could you just stop? Because we can hear you, but we can you mute yourself for a second? Yeah, thank you. So we can hear something, but we just can't hear you. So there's still an issue. I believe that IT team are on the line, and they can hear what the troubles are. So if you don't mind, either typing in the question that you have, and then and and then we'll put that forward. If you want to stick it into the box, and I'll read it out for you. Is that okay? So yeah, Councillor Bishnu. So I believe the IT teams instructed you to restart your teams and then try dialing back in again. Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you can hear me, and if you can, just type your question in the chat, and then I'll be able to read it out for you. Yeah, if you otherwise you may have to restart your teams and try dial back in. So however, yeah, thank you once again, Rob, on that on running through the presentation. Absolutely great. I'm sure it'll be a keen interest to the local residents, as many probably do not even know that such great places do exist. So I encourage you to, I'm sure, and all our members there do encourage you to keep up the good work in promoting this, and I'm sure we will do as much as we can. So I'll move on to the final item for tonight, and that'd be the so that's fine. So that'd be any other business, and in this particular one, I believe we've got a petition, and the petitioner may not be on the line to read it out. So I believe Wendy or Joe will read this out for us.
Yeah, Chair, it's Wendy who's going to do it. But before you move on, in terms of the items for the future meetings, which we discussed the other night, item 9, there was 3 items that you proposed. One is the mental health strategies and understanding mental health, particularly during COVID-19 lockdown, mindfulness and well-being, and also asking someone to come along from the community partnership units to give an update on the recovery fund for COVID, particularly projects that have been supported in your areas. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that they've been mentioned by some of the members of the forum in the past. So I mean, of course, we couldn't get everything on the agenda this evening. Otherwise, we'll be here for another couple of hours. So so we did have to prioritize the items that were deemed more critical. So yeah, I mean, social isolation, mental health, and all those that you've just mentioned I'll have to add those into the following agenda as we agreed. But yeah, thank you for highlighting that, Joe. So I mean, for any other business, any other matters of business that we see arising, if there are any, please say.
Chair, do you want me to read the petition?
Yeah. Oh yeah, please do read out, Wendy.
Okay, so you've had the petition in the supplementary agenda, and I've been in touch with the petitioner, who's a lady called Cllr Mohammed, and she's provided me with a statement that she wants me to read out on her behalf. Okay, the statement goes like this. My name is Cllr Mohammed. I live in Bedfont Village. I've lived in Bedfont Village since November 2005, and I've enjoyed living in a community where the characteristics of a village remain in place even today. The local community has strength of character. The community is tight-knit, with many people knowing and socialising with their neighbours and friends nearby. This is helped with a strong local shopping area with essential services such as local chemists, a post office, a Tesco Express, and coffee shops and restaurants that are popular with the local people who live here. In addition, Bedfont benefits from active local churches, local scouting and guiding clubs. The library is well used and was strongly defended against closure approximately 10 years ago. It has 2 primary schools, a large special needs school, and a further secondary school that means many families know each other and support one another as their children grow and learn. Part of the charm of Bedfont Village, along with its rich history and its village green, is the access to much valued green spaces, both in the village and in the surrounding areas. We have Bedfont Lakes, T4 Hill, and the green spaces north of the Duke of Northumberland River, which stretch up between Tesco Duke's Green and the urban farm over to Hatton Cross. I was delighted when the council invested in building pathways from the pedestrian bridge at Richmond Avenue all along the north of the river to the urban farm and Duke's Green. My family and I have enjoyed this space throughout our children's childhoods, now 15 and 10, being able to keep fit, play games, walk away from the congested roads between our home and the farm, go on nature hunts, meet friends, have picnics, go and see the horses and explore. The peacefulness of this space north of the river has, I believe, allowed for wildlife and biodiversity to flourish. The land left to go wild is brimming with insects, including bees and butterflies, where the grasses grow long with wildflowers in the spring and summer. Also, the Duke of Northumberland River itself benefits from the lack of activity to the north of its banks. In 2020, we saw rusty geese, kingfishers, a swan pair nested and gave us cygnets to watch grow, coots, moorhens and ducks in high numbers. We also saw kites overhead, enjoying hunting over the wild areas, as well as flocks of sparrows, flourishing despite a regular flyover by sparrowhawk. There is a resident fox who is loved by the families that get to see them visit our gardens. Toads, frogs and newts are plentiful. In my opinion, if this land is destroyed to become an industrial park, we are making a massive mistake. In a world where we should be protecting our environment, protecting biodiversity, and recognising the benefits of open spaces on people's mental health and well-being, we should be doing quite the opposite and protecting our green spaces for the generations to come. The trees and plant life are contributing to the lungs of the area, locking in carbon and giving us all oxygen, as well as a huge amount of beauty to cherish. When the economy is shrinking due to COVID, Brexit and the wider impact of geopolitical change, in times of such uncertainty about how the future will look as we emerge from a global pandemic, it would be a crime to rush ahead destroying our much valued village, turning it into an industrial park with the remnants of a village trying to survive alongside it. Should the proposed industrial park go ahead and be of any success, questionable this could end up a park of empty units and a white elephant, then the increase in traffic through the village would be a disaster, especially in light of the plans around Clockhouse Roundabout and the proposed increases in housing near Bedfont village. Bedfont Primary School, 3 classes per year, already struggles with the air pollution from being so close to the flight path, and Hatton Road is being a busy road already. Marjorie Kinnan is a huge school next door with hundreds of children coming and going every day. Hatton Road is already creaking from flow-through traffic at school drop-off and pick-up times. The increase in pollution and congestion would make the village a very difficult place to live in, to leave to go off to work from and school and to come home to. At the present time, the principal bus routes used in Bedfont is the H25, the H26, the 116 and the 203. All of these bus routes are already busy with all members of the local community, adults and children included. In non-COVID times, it's not uncommon for buses to go by full and for there to be gaps in service of 20 minutes or more. By increasing the population in Bedfont, the public transportation would not be sufficient, and although there are plans included for rail links, I'm sure there will be time lags between the different parts of the plan that would cause a huge amount of disruption to connectivity for our local community. 156 people signed the petition which I set up. I strongly believe there are more people, including the population of residents that are simply not involved online, who would be opposed to these plans. On the Felton Community Facebook page, community members have commented extensively in anger at the plans which will completely change the village beyond recognition. Indeed, there is much anger around the fact that even today there are residents who knew nothing at all about these proposals at the time of their development or even now. There are concerns ranging from environmental, cultural, safety, social and planning, traffic congestion and disruption issues. I would ask the decision makers, including the Planning Inspectorate, to join the community in seeing these plans as overzealous and too destructive in their nature, and for Bedfont Village to be protected from overdevelopment, such as we are seeing in the existing proposals. In a year where we host climate change discussions in our country, and as a country that has initiatives to plant more trees than ever before, where the seriousness of biodiversity has never had so much attention, let's not bulldoze this beautiful space. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, for reading that out. And I mean, yeah, that was I mean, that there's definitely some key and interesting points in that petition that may need to be considered as and when this does pop up. I mean, in the planning committee. So we've got Councillor Javed, I believe, who's got something to say on this. Councillor Javed.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as far as the consultation is, the Councillor Steve Curran, the leader of the our authority, he have promised that he will do more consultation, and he's also more than happy to join us on our area forum to answer the questions and to clarify any issues. And any other forum if whenever it's right to do so. I agree with the most of the contents of this petition. No doubt that the Feltham master plan is very impressive one, as it will create more jobs, development for the area. Having said that, we will like, you know, for that development and all that stuff, we need infrastructure, and it's rightly said, more schools, surgeries, and all that stuff. So we have to keep that in mind. But the most important thing, which is mentioned, like, you know, before as well, that you were considering to discuss on mental health issues and all that stuff, which we have noticed during this pandemic. This pandemic have also, like, you know, we realized during the pandemic the importance of these green areas and the parks, and we have to, we are lucky, to be very honest. We have Bedfont lakes where I take my children for walks and cycling. So I will stress that we have to protect our green areas and the park for our coming generation, and to protect the environment and of course the wildlife. We also know during this pandemic that how like, you know, this pandemic or these kind of pandemics are can affect the thickly populated areas, and how difficult it's to control the spread. So I think that we need to have, like, you know, be very mindful to have a balance between the developments and all the factors which is mentioned in the petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Javed. Absolutely, absolutely, I agree with you on that as well. But that is definitely a matter of discussion as and when this does come up in the committee and during planning scrutiny. Okay, thank you very much. And I believe that was the final item on the agenda. So just now, finally, just the date of the next meeting, and just to inform you, that is to be confirmed. It's not been set in stone yet. And yeah, absolutely, I would like to pay thanks to all the members, council officers and the IT officers who are producing the meeting, and the democratic services and the APO who supported this meeting and managed to get it organized this evening, and prepping everything together. And of course, definitely, I would also like to thank everyone, including the public, all member of publics that are watching with us tonight, for being present at the meeting. And if you've had any questions that have not been fully answered or yet, you can always get in contact with the council, with Joe or Wendy, and for any further clarifications. And yeah, thank you once again, everyone, and I hope you all have a good night.
Good night, Chair. Thank you. Bye-bye, Councillors.
Thank you very